update. You were amazing. I asked you to talk with students and listen to them and to their presentations, their poster, and you did it. There were people lined up and you talked to them. They felt like they were so important, and you validated their work, and I just really, really appreciate you doing that. It doesn't cost anything to be nice, but you in the meantime, you end up learning something because they're out there doing work and trying to answer questions that we all have. This is amazing. It was wonderful. I'm so happy and proud of you for doing that. Rebecca, don't give up. We're coming back together. Any luck? So it was over 20 years ago. I heard Rebecca Stevens having a conversation with Earl just a few minutes ago, and it was over 20 years ago when Earl found out about the Coeur d'Alenes and the Coeur d'Alenes efforts with their Superfund site, and it actually invited a couple of the attorneys from their site to come and visit us. And so, Rebecca, you guys have been ahead of us, 20 years ahead of us. You're like the future. You're like the future we're going to have. So you're fighting our fights before we even have to fight them. I can't tell you how important that is. It's mind-blowing to know that there's someone moving in front of us that's telling what our future could be. And just like Jim Walford was saying earlier, you all managed to get a treatment of your mine water discharges. We still haven't got that, but we do have hope. And we have hope because you got that. You did it. You got it. You're doing it. And in the future, our site can have that also. The connection is what you met, all of you met Tammy Lowry a moment ago. And Tammy now works for one of those attorneys that came down to tell us what Coeur d'Alene is doing 20 years ago. And so it's really a pleasure to reconnect us through time and space and be in the same room with each other. But before everybody else begins to peel out of our room, I want to reintroduce you to Dan Brabander, who is a visitor who came back to us also. He came back, it wasn't 20 years ago, it was a little less than that when he was last here. But he is now one of our recipients of this year's Mike Sinar Environmental Excellence Award, and presented to him for his enduring service to the people of Ottawa County. And we really value your help. And every one of you in this room will eventually get a Mike Sinar because you're going to keep coming back and you're going to keep helping us. And we're going to keep recognizing it. But it's Dan's turn right now.
It's remarkable the sphere of people that Rebecca brings together to bring Tar Creek back to its rightful place. And every time I come here, we learn new things from the network of people that you have brought together. And we get more than we give every single time. And the influence goes well beyond Ottawa County and to the many students in my classrooms who learn every semester about Tar Creek. So we spread the news far and wide. So thank you.
Rebecca, you in there? It's all you. It's finally your turn. Not my turn, her turn.
Okay, sorry, you couldn't hear that last part, Rebecca and Jim. All right, well, I'll pass with greets on. Hello, everybody. I'm Rebecca Stevens with the Coeur d'Alene Tribe, all the way from North Idaho, Region 10 for the EPAers in the room, Pacific Northwest. I'm honored to be here. Thank you so much for Rebecca and Jim, for Tammy, and everybody that's worked on this case over the years. I know you're going to hear from one of my dear friends in Maryland. I'll get started. I know you guys have a long rest of your day and a full day tomorrow, so I'll just get started on our presentation of who we are, where we've been, and where we're going. If I can advance. Of course. Okay. So, just a little overview. I need to touch on the history for our story, touch on CERCLA, Superfund, and NERDA working together, talk about the natural resource injuries that were proved up, as well as the assessment determination, the damages, aka the dollar amounts, and the settlements that were received, and where we're at implementing active natural resource restoration in the Coeur d'Alene Basin. Since time immemorial, the Tsimshian, or those who were found here, have been the leaders and the natural resource managers of the Coeur d'Alene Basin. They were put here by the Creator, really essentially to protect the heart of their people, Coeur d'Alene Lake, and they continue today to be very strong leaders in protecting natural resources that they benefit from, as well as all the people in our community. So I would be remiss if I didn't share this beautiful photos of the community that I've been honored to work with over the last 20 years. So this is the Panhandle of Idaho. The Aboriginal territory of the Coeur d'Alene spanned originally about 5 million acres. We are an executive order tribe, and over many executive orders in the late 1800s, our reservation is, sadly, I have to use the words that are true. The reservation has been diminished down to about 345,000 acres from the original 5 million acres. But this Aboriginal territory is still utilized by the Coeur d'Alenes, and it's right in the heart of our Superfund site. Mining was, gold and silver were discovered around the same time as Tar Creek with the zinc and lead in the late 1800s. And mining essentially put Idaho on the map. When our federal government discovered this discovery of gold, silver, and zinc, it really became a leader in providing those minerals to support the wars of World War I and World War II. We still have active mining today, but as you can imagine, the historic mining practices weren't necessarily in line with how the tribe and the people that lived here utilized the natural resources. So we had releases into the environment. We had dredging realities that came about when you have hard rock mining, mostly superficial, so it's a little different than Tar Creek. We didn't go down in the ground, we went into the mountains, into the hillsides. But in order to get those ores out, it was a jig tailing practice. It was pretty inefficient. I think that less than 75% of the ore that was discovered actually got all of those minerals, and so as a result, the mine tailings were released into the environment because they had to get them out of the way so they could keep mining. The photo on the upper left of the slide is of a dredge. We call it the Cataldo dredge. It operated from 1938 to 1968, and it was really a pull by the mining companies. The upstream mining companies were noticing they were choking out the rivers. And so they needed to pull their resources together, dredge one of the main rivers in our basin, and dispose of those mine tailings, unfortunately, directly into wetlands and floodplains. The upper right photo is a plume, a very recent plume in geologic time to us. This photo was taken in 2008. This is of the Coeur d'Alene River coming into Coeur d'Alene Lake. And that suspended sediment that you see in this one event had about 20,000 parts per million lead. Our cleanup standard for human health is 700 parts per million lead. And for ecological cleanup, which I'll touch on here in a little bit, is 530 parts per million lead. And you might be thinking, so the ecological cleanup standard is more stringent than human health? Well, that's because the tribe and our other trustees were able to prove up that injury. So you've heard a lot about CERCLA, the Comprehensive Environmental, oh, there's my dog, of course.
I'm not hearing you. I'm not hearing you.
Okay, so under the Comprehensive Environmental Response Compensation Liability Act, CERCLA, there's Superfund, which the site was listed in 1983 due to the highest blood lead levels in the basin. Freezing up again. Right.
Not hearing you.
Sorry, there's a shot of the Bunker Hill Mine and Metallurgical Complex site, which is in the Silver Valley. The arrow is pointing to the smelter. You heard earlier from Jonathan, a lot of the lead contamination that we've seen on the landscape from Superfund sites does come from air particulate. This smelter was in operation for about 60 years until it went down in 1993. It was quite the sight to see. You'll see other Superfund sites like the Anaconda in Butte, Montana, where the community actually rallied to keep their smelter stack as a National Historic Registry landmark. So this smelter went down, the mine went bankrupt, and we were seeing at that time in the late 1970s that the blood lead levels in the children that lived in the communities around here were the highest in the nation. And it really came down to the doctors in the area working with the Agency of Substance Toxic Registry, ATSDR Disease Registry, to really put this site, elevate this site to EPA to be considered, to be listed on the national priorities list, of which it was in 1983, just like Tar Creek. Just another example like Tar Creek, we have operable units. Our site only has 3. Operable Unit 1, which was right around where that smelter operated, which was the populated area around Kellogg. That's the name of the city. And they started really looking at cleaning up the yards, working with those communities to try to stop that exposure of lead, cadmium, zinc, and arsenic from having human health concerns to the public. In the mid-1990s, they did open up Operable Unit 2, which was just the non-populated areas outside, but they were also impacted, and then later in the 2000s, they expanded it to Operable Unit 3 downstream, which included Coeur d'Alene Lake. That's another story, but it's very important, and I will touch on that. So under the Natural Resource Damage and Assessment Program that Joshua mentioned, the NERDAR, some folks might joke around, and if you drop the R, it's NERDA, not really doing anything. This is patience. I've been working with the Tar Creek tribes for many years, and this stuff takes time. Under the Code of Federal Regulations, working with Department of the Interior, this is a hard process to navigate. And I've learned everything I learned from my predecessor, Philip Cernera, our attorneys, and our tribal leaders and elders that could really see what was happening on the landscape. EPA came in and they were looking at human health and the environment, but they weren't really looking at the natural resources as much as the tribe had desired to be looked at. There's an old picture of my boss up in the corner. It's pretty funny to have it here. So the state of Idaho did file the first NERDA claim against the mining companies in 1986, but as I mentioned previously, mining built Idaho. So how dare you bite the hand that feeds you, right? So they settled with those mining companies fairly quickly. I believe it was for $5 million, which was a lot back then. But they did not want to pursue any more lawsuits against the mining companies, and the tribe could see that this just wasn't satisfactory. And so our dear elder, Henry Saijon, in 1991, went to Department of the Interior and said, we need to do something about this. Our fish are dying, our birds are dying, our community, our tribal members are no longer able to gather, have ceremonial practices, and conduct these activities in their Aboriginal territory due to this destruction and the harm that has been caused to the environment from these historic mine wastes. And so it took a few years, but in 1996, our federal partners did join in the lawsuit. And that was a big deal because when the mining companies saw that Department of the Interior and Department of Agriculture were now involved, they got shaken in their boots. This is a big deal because we were able to leverage the work that the tribe was doing in collecting that natural resource injury data with what the federal family could bring along as trustees and start the official NERDAR process. Henry did say at that time, get out there, collect that irrefutable data. Hopefully you all, all the young scientists in the room, can understand the importance of irrefutable data. We knew we were gonna have to go to court. We knew we were gonna have to prove up injury to these natural resources and let no stone be left unturned. And we actually did flip over stones to look at the paraphyte and everything that was injured from the toxicity of mine waste. A couple of quotes from Henry: the effect of the pollution on my people cannot be measured. This ground has been consecrated by the bones of ancestors. You know, the river ran white at one time. There are these dead tundra swans, migratory tundra swans that were coming in the Pacific Flyway, landing in our wetlands that were contaminated, burrowing down to get their water potatoes and the food source that they rely on, and they were getting sick. Lead poisoning, lead toxicity is a real thing. Not only were the people getting sick, but we were seeing these beautiful migratory birds and fish, and just water quality in general was being found injured due to the data that the tribe led the way in gathering. So as you can imagine, lots of memorandums of agreements with federal trustees to figure out who was going to do what. How are we going to navigate this process? We wanted to make sure that we were doing the best that we could with the resources we had. We did borrow funds against the Department of the Interior NERDAR program, which is still active today. It is something that the trustees in Tark Creek have done, where every year they borrow funds from the national fund in hopes that they can get out, collect that data, do these studies, prove up injury, and then once they settled and once we settled, we actually had to pay those funds back to the national fund. You might be familiar with the Gulf resources spill, very similar with Deep Horizon. So we proved up injury. Keep in mind this took about 22 years to officially prove up injury, so because we knew we were going to have to go to court. A lot of this data was collected based on the tribe's utilization of these resources, the water potato, the camas, the things that they used in their traditional practices. And so with those data that we collected, or data that was collected, we did settle with some of the de minimis parties, the smaller mining companies, earlier on, which did give us a little bit of foothold to continue proving up our injuries so we could do the injury determination and assessment under the DOI regulations. So those early settlements, and there were a couple of bankruptcies, and then the last settlement was just yesterday in my mind, was with Hecla. The two biggest mining companies was ASARCO, American Smelting and Refining Company. They're a national mining company, still active, and then Hecla is also still active. But we have settled our claims against them. And once we settled, we decided, okay, we have all these trustees, as you've seen in the previous slides. We have the federal government with Department of Agriculture, the Forest Service, Department of the Interior, Bureau of Land Management, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Coeur d'Alene Tribe, and then the state of Idaho. And you know, it's kind of funny because the state of Idaho settled their claims in '86, but they didn't settle against Hecla. So when we were back at the table with the Hecla Mining Company, the state of Idaho said, oh, don't forget, we didn't settle. So now they came back after 20 years of the tribe and the federal trustees going through this NERDA process. The state came back in and said, well, we get to play along and help make decisions on how to use your settlement funds. We did go through the National Environmental Policy Act process. Some trustees in other NERDA cases have not gone through NEPA, but our federal trustees and attorneys felt that it was the best way to go. It's a public process, really making sure that whatever alternatives we have for restoration won't cause harm to other activities happening on the landscape, keeping in mind that EPA is still on the hook and doing the cleanup under Superfund. So we went through that process. It took about 7 years. Responded to comments, and we initiated restoration on the ground. We developed a restoration plan, which I think some are seeing it, it's only like 80 pages. The environmental impact statement is more like you can hold a door open with it. It really had to look at analyzing the effects and the analysis of the effects of what our activities might do. Because keep in mind, these settlement dollars are the public's. These are not the tribes, the states, or the federal governments. These are the public's dollars. It's our responsibility of the trustees to put those dollars on the landscape for natural resource restoration to try to get toward baseline, which means toward what the conditions might have been absent the release of the hazardous substances. We're never going to get back to the way it was before, but we can try to work toward it. So that's something to keep in mind too. We have a lot of data. We want the resources to funnel us down onto the ground. Our final settlement was about $140 million, which if you look at the grand scheme of things is a drop in the bucket. It took 200 years to pollute the Coeur d'Alene Basin. It's going to take just as long to clean it up. So here we are now. We reached that final settlement in 2011. We completed our plan and we went out and solicited for projects in 2019. We had 44 product ideas submitted to us from the public, which is very exciting. Some of them were, mom and pop projects. Some didn't really fit the goals and objectives of our restoration plan, but we want to be strategic. So we know where EPA is doing the remedy or the cleanup. We don't want to go and undo what they're doing, but we need to work together under surplus. So working closely with EPA on all these projects. And we just went out for more project ideas recently. So I just wanted to show you a few examples of what natural resource restoration looks like in the Coeur d'Alene Basin. Here's just another drawing, and I should have put that map of Idaho up for you earlier on, but this is the outline of the Coeur d'Alene Basin and our restoration planning area. It's actually a little bigger than the Superfund site within Idaho, but as was mentioned earlier, the Superfund site actually goes all the way into Washington, where the Spokane River dumps into the Columbia River, which is 2,100 square miles. But when we did our NEPA process, the public told us, this is where the injury happened. We want to see those settlement funds utilized in the basin where we as the public can realize the benefits of those restoration activities. And just as a little reminder, restoration and remedy, they do work hand in hand under Superfund as they should. They can happen at the same time, in my opinion, as they should. But remedy is really the cleaning up of the contaminated waste, either cleaning it up, putting it in a repository, or capping it, keeping it in place, breaking that barrier to even helping the environment. The restoration, as I like to say, is kind of the icing on the cake, where we come in and try to bring streams back into their sinuosity and bring vegetation back along in areas that were impacted by mine waste contamination. We have wetland restoration projects where EPA has scraped up contamination, capped it, and we've gone in and worked with soil amendments and done restoration activities. And the bottom left photo is actually an agricultural to wetland conversion project right in the heart of where those tundra swans migrate through and land and feed here. This project has taken almost 16 years. We are seeing tundra swans feeding here. It's very exciting, but keep in mind restoration takes time as well as remedy. Coeur d'Alene Lake, she is downstream of a lot of this mine waste contamination, and we have 83 million metric tons of mine waste contamination at the bottom of Coeur d'Alene Lake. Lead, zinc, cadmium, arsenic, similar constituents as Tar Creek. This is It's heartbreaking for the Coeur d'Alenes. This water body, this lake, this gem is what the Creator put them here to protect. And so it's our charge to keep our finger on the pulse, because right now, EPA doesn't have a remedy. They don't have a plan to clean up the lake. So they've been relying on Idaho and the tribe under their Clean Water Act authority to monitor Coeur d'Alene Lake and its water quality, nitrogen, phosphorus, heavy metals, you name it. And so we are able to fund some of this work through our restoration settlement dollars. We do a lot of education outreach, as you all, as our up-and-coming educators are doing. Very important, because we can't scream from the mountaintop over and over again the importance of having the tribe as a leader with our other trustees for the state and the federal government in toe step as we continue to navigate restoring this basin toward where it wants to be. We have some lake this is Lake Creek, this is a stream enhancement project. Probably can't see a fish or a trout get through that culvert down there, and so we're looking at culvert replacements, restoring fish passages, creating cool water for adfluvial cutthroat trout refugia so they can get away during the colder months. Another project on the reservation is a culturally significant plant restoration project, bringing back camas, a main staple and traditional food item for the Tzitzit Saguch. In areas where they can't gather because it's still so contaminated, we're able to replace or enhance other areas in our planning area using our NERDA settlement dollars. And you might see some words on the side here. Our tribe has decided to, through our tribal council, to adopt their language in some of the names of our projects. So Hillinchinch, this is the mouth here. We have a lot of beaver activity down in this area. We're restoring a levee that was once breached. We have a non-native fishery that's munching on our adfluvial cutthroat trout. We're trying to get rid of that non-native or invasive species and try to restore it for our native cutthroat. Coeur d'Alene Tribe as a nursery, we're super stoked about this project. We have 7 different species of native willows that we are able to grow out and use in our restoration projects within the basin. Heck, we even share them with the state. We let the state of Idaho use some of our willows in their projects, the Forest Service, Department of the Interior on some of their wetland projects. It's very exciting, and always looking forward to seeing how the grow out's going to be every year. We were able to fund a put-and-take fishery for the Coeur d'Alenes. For over 100 years, red band trout were not in one of our major tributaries on the reservation. We were able to bring back an experience for tribal members and tribal youth to have that feeling of what it's like to capture a native salmonid in their ancestral streams with traditional practices. So that was really exciting. Another ag wetland projects. This one, Fish and Wildlife Service is the sponsor. We have another one working with a private landowner. Conservation easements are a good tool. We're holding this land with a landowner until EPA can come and clean up the contaminated areas, and then we'll go in and do restoration and bring back those food items that the migratory waterfowl like to eat and loaf in. Upper left, these are some state of Idaho projects, Department of Environmental Quality. We have a DEQ here as well. Stream bank restoration. Another was some land acquisition at an old mine site, working with them to try to do some restoration where that contamination will always be there, but we can do some enhancements on the side where we know that there is a fishery. And then working with private landowners on riverbank stabilization. Idaho Department of Fish and Game has created a clean fishing hole, I guess you could call it. This is a clean fishing oasis within the Superfund site, and it does not get contaminated, but it allows for human use and services to be provided through the NERDA program, and people can fish and they're safe to eat, so that's exciting. Another agricultural to wetland project with Gray's Meadow and bridge replacements for fish passage. Working with the counties, the cities, a lot of partners. It takes a lot of people to pull these projects off, and strategy. We are using a drone. We can use a drone now. I think EPA is about to release a memo that that's gonna be a doable thing. Summer has her special camera, but it's a great tool to be able to see the landscape and where we're doing our restoration projects. The one on the right is a Forest Service project on National Forest land where they're removing a fish passage barrier to bull trout, which is an endangered species. Very exciting, that project was completed this last summer. And then the bottom left is a Bureau of Land Management project that we're working with them on to bring back sinuosity into a major tributary into Coeur d'Alene Lake, which will also drop out nutrients, which is really important for protecting Coeur d'Alene Lake. We're not gonna dredge our lake. It would be too much, and the tribe actually has a moratorium on the southern third that no dredging will occur. It's too much, but there are things that we can do on the landscape to help prevent further injury or harm to our lakes. So I'll try to get through these a little bit more quickly. We decided this year to be more focused on our solicitation with the public, and we really want to look at the bull trout habitat. Up in the upper St. Joe River, which is a clean tributary in our basin, has some bull trout, but very few. They are on the brink of being extirpated, which is devastating to the tribe and our community to see the loss of an endangered species on our watch. And so we're really focusing on restoring, enhancing areas where we have bull trout reds, the eggs, restoring those areas, protecting them so we don't lose this precious species. More active stream restoration. Some things that we try to remind the public that active restoration doesn't look pretty right away. There is some disturbance in the interim, but give it time, give it patience, and you can see some of these areas where we put in large woody debris and bringing back streams the way that they used to be before the mining companies channelized them. We are seeing fish return, so there is a good story to be told here. And again, the protection of Coeur d'Alene Lake, the heart of the Coeur d'Alene people. Wetland restoration in areas that are either clean, where we can do enhancement, or in areas where we can see contaminated wetlands. That left map shows that we have wetland sediments that are in exceedances of the cleanup standard, 4,000 to 5,000 parts per million lead. You can see some areas that aren't as hot, I would say, and that's where we've purchased those conservation easements to try to just get them ready for when EPA has finished up with their remedy, which is going to take a long time. And then the last few slides are just how do we figure out where we're going to identify restoration projects? Well, we created an eligibility criteria. We work with the public to say, okay, if you want a project, well, one, it needs to be in our basin. It can't be in Alaska or in a different state, because these funds were settled upon for the injury that happened here, and the public told us that. We don't want to spend our funds on physical structures like playgrounds or airports or hotels. You might see some other NERDA cases like the Deepwater Horizon. They actually did use some of their settlement funds to build hotels because that injury that happened there kept people from coming to visit. And their trustee council decided we want people to come visit again. Well, because of our limited dollars here, and that's not an issue for us, we really are focused on natural resource restoration work. We don't want to cause additional injury or harm to any resources while we're doing the work. And we also need to avoid human health risks. They got to be legal, they have to be applicable, relevant, and appropriate requirements. So we have to make sure we're following the law. Once again, no infrastructure projects. Something near and dear to Philip and I when we were working on this restoration plan is the cultural significance of restoring natural resources. We didn't prove up injury to culture. We didn't prove up injury to cultural services. I think some of you might have heard me say, how do you put a dollar value on church or religion or ceremony or family or ancestors? You can't, but you can prove up injury and assign a dollar or a damage amount to natural resources through the DOI NERD program. And our tribal government said if you can do that, if you can restore those natural resources, by way of, you will restore those lost cultural services. And so that's what our goal is to really work on those projects. And we don't want to use our funds on other things like county infrastructure projects. We have to be real strategic. Some takeaways, relationships are key. It's not easy. It will be uncomfortable at times. I hate to say it, but you know, conceding to some things, it can work. Compromise is huge. The terms settlement and negotiate are almost insults to injury to tribes, at least that I've worked with, but they are the process to get you down the road. Something that the tribe was always really proud of from our leadership is that we held the GIS database, and we continue to hold the administrative record. And even though it's open to the public if they request information, developing our injury determination through the assessment process and having that data with the tribe at the home was key, very important. So lastly, our trustee council is reviewing 11 more projects. They'll be making funding decisions hopefully here in the next 3 weeks. And so more work is underway, and we're really excited to continue working with our fellow tribes in the Superfund and in NERDA world. And so with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Anybody have a question? I'm not seeing. Yes, go ahead. Do you have a question?
No questions? Wow, I got off lucky.
There's
Oh,
one
okay.
question, one question. It's coming.
Hi, my name is Kristen Marcel. I'm with the Climigration Network, and we heard a retired EPA staff person this morning talking about how contamination in Tart Creek might be affecting Grand Lake. And I'm curious what impacts you've seen in Coeur d'Alene Lake in the water quality, like in the water column, with heavy metals and some of the contamination there, and just wondering what the parallels might look like here in Oklahoma. Thank you.
Oh, sure. No, that's a good question. It's an interesting dynamic. Our lake is deep, and it flushes about once every other year. We have 2 rivers that flow into it, and one in the Spokane River out. If it weren't for the depth and the annual flushing and turnover, we would be in a lot more trouble. I will tell you that. Our metals are bound as sediment, and so they are at the bottom of the lake, and the only thing keeping them there is oxygen. And having that oxygen cap, keeping those metals at the bottom of the lake, is the only remedy we have going on in town. Now, that oxygen cap can be released due to nutrients. So you have phosphorus and nitrogen coming in from fertilizers, lawns, anything we do, logging, agriculture, anything we do on the landscape, those nutrients can come into the lake. Well, what do nutrients do on your lawn? They make plants grow, right? So when those plants grow, they die and they senesce. And when they die and senesce at the bottom of the lake, the little microbes eat up that oxygen, and that's when we can see the release of the suspended sediment and the contaminants releasing from the sediment. It's called benthic flux. It's a huge process. USGS has been looking into it for a long time. We don't want that to happen, so we've been in preventative mode since day one, because EPA has yet to come up with what they're going to do to address that contamination. So what we're really doing is trying to manage our landscape activities to keep those metals at the bottom.
None of that's happening.
I hope that helps.
Wow.
And I see that Earl has raised his hand on in the Zoom meeting. So Earl, if you want to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I've already done
Perfect. It's all you.
that. Thank you, and thank you for that little segue, Rebecca, because that explains part of my question, which was about how you were able to get the wastewater treatment plant at your site to stop the metals from running into the lake. And you just described exactly what's going on at Grand Lake because we have the poultry industry that has turned Grand Lake eutrophic for a very long time, for several decades. And that was a warning by the Water Resources Board back in 1997, who said in their beneficial use report that the lake was eutrophic and that if it continued to accumulate metals and if the trophic conditions continued to worsen over time, that these would create dangerous conditions. And that was in 97, and it has gotten worse, very much worse. And so they were worried that the lake would, every time it would turn over, it would suspend heavy metals. And you just described that process. And this is what we need to stop, is the pouring in of nutrients into the lake and the pouring in of metals into the lake. And this was my question before about the controls to prevent, from operable unit 1 to prevent the metals from washing into our stream and into the lake, and also the nutrients washing into the lake and creating these dangerous conditions. But let's talk about the metals and how you got the wastewater treatment system to begin controlling them.
Well, we recently had upgrades to our central treatment plant in the Silver Valley. EPA was overseeing those upgrades, knowing that the state was eventually going to take that facility over. I think that was even mentioned before from Jim. We were very nervous about that because we knew that EPA, and sorry EPA colleagues in the room, very siloed, looking at contaminants of concern. They didn't want to hear phosphorus and nitrogen, and so they were moving forward in their upgrades to this wastewater treatment facility, which was treating mine waste, acid mine drainage. They were looking, as they should, zinc, cadmium, other contaminants, mostly zinc. We said, but hang on, can you also treat phosphorus while you're at it? Because we know that that plant is also, we see a lot of phosphorus coming out of there. So it took a lot of back and forth, a little bit of indigenous justice thrown out there that, what you're doing here is eventually gonna end up in Coeur d'Alene Lake. And so we, through our good relationships and tough conversations, were able to get EPA to address treating phosphorus at the same time that they're treating zinc as a contaminant of concern. So it just takes diligence and, really showing the story as a whole and not just looking at what they are charged to do. And that would be my advice. Just stick with those relationships you have with EPA and keep pushing.
Thank you.
I can't believe it. This was absolutely what I needed to hear. And I think everybody in the room needed you to say these things exactly how you said them. So thank
You
you.
can't hear anything you're talking.
Mark.
It's okay.
Okay, it's kind of a joke here. Are we speaking? I don't know. Anyway, thank you very much. Thank you. We needed to hear this, and we needed it in the exact order today as we've heard it. So you were very patient with us to let students do their posters and let us have a lunch break, and I really appreciate that, because what you've just told us is our, and I thought it would be, the recipe for the next 20 years. Yeah.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good to see you at lunch.
Thank you. Wow. Okay. So we're not too far behind because Carl isn't here. So Carl's not going to talk a long time about something. No, he wouldn't. He's delightful, and you would like him, and he would be so shy to even be standing here. But I would like to ask our friend Sarah Goyer to come. It's your turn. if you are, yes, here she comes, yay. At Region 6, EPA, OU5, coming up with Sarah Goyer. Thank you. And I don't know, Michael. Flash drive. If you have flash drives this afternoon, I'm going to introduce you to Michael, and you'll need to tell him beforehand, or I get to talk for another 10 minutes in between, which I don't mind, and I could share this space with anybody else. But back here in this, the cutest dress ever made is Laurel Smith. And what she has on is a dress that was in the silent auction last year, made out of pieces of our former Tar Creek shirts. It is just so cute, you can't stand it. But why is she there? She's there because we are doing a project with OU, and it's Air, Water, and Work. If you've not talked to her and you have a story, please stop and visit with her. We are excited about collecting the stories, our stories, because we've got stories here on our relationship with water, our relationship with air, and our relationship with this place we call home. Once again, thank you, Ed. Once again, Jim Wilford for this morning. Yeah, how we doing? Still peaking? Okay. So if you needed a refill, this is your moment, because we probably won't let up again. We're having a fish fry at 5 o'clock. It's going to be delicious. Joe Johnson is cooking. He's going to cook right outside the door. If you have to leave at 5 o'clock, do not leave without a fish dinner with you, okay? He's cooking a lot of fish, and we want you to eat. If you're going home after at 5 o'clock, take a plate for your family too, okay? All right. And we're having an auction, and I really don't know how to auction. I tried it before. Anybody here can help us with the auction tonight? Anybody got an auction wish? Okay, good. Yes, we have one.
You're advancing right there.
Yes, Joseph will be our auctioneer. And we have a few items. If you have something that you had in your car that you thought, oh, I wish I could donate that, this would be a good time. You could go out and get that real quick, because I'm going out and get what I'm bringing in. Okay.
Here we are.
So, are you ready? Yeah. Good. Thank you. Sarah Goyer.
Okay. Sorry about that, Rebecca. This is actually the first time I've been in charge of this part, and so.
But look here, I got to talk about the fish fry.
See, you had to plug your fish fry. Everybody get your fish. You know, there's going to be a raffle. There's going to be an auction and all that good stuff. Okay, so hi, I'm Sarah Goyer. I'm a remedial project manager, or what they call an RPM, for Operable Unit 5, or OU5, which are the watersheds for the Tar Creek site in Region 6. I have been an RPM for about a year and a half, and getting close to a year ago is when I took over for Katrina Coltrane, who was the RPM previously. And she left quite abruptly a few months after I started. So the last year has been about really trying to educate myself on the 43 years of history, and all the operable units kind of interact with each other. And I'm also the lead RPM, so I have my hands in all of the goodie jars. We're going to go through the different OUs later. This is the watershed portion. So I'm just going to talk about the watersheds and tie in a couple things so you can hopefully understand, get some context. Anyway, so the Operable Unit 5 is the surface water and sediments that are in the Tar Creek Superfund site. So it's wetted bank to wetted bank of the creeks and the streams and rivers. I put this map in here so you can see that we have 9 tribal nations. It's Ottawa County is the entire, the boundary of the Superfund site, the very outer boundary that would include all operable units is Ottawa County. So anywhere in here is a Superfund site. We have 9 tribal nations and service areas, reservations and service areas. And as you, I just thought it would be important for you guys to see how those tribal nations are set up in the waterway, just as a general overview. This map shows that there are 4 Superfund sites all within the Tri-State Mining District. So Oklahoma is just one of those 4. And you know, as you know, water doesn't care about state, county, Superfund, or any other boundaries. It does what water does, it flows downstream. So it's important to show the whole story. So Tri-State Mining District, all 4 Superfund sites. Oklahoma, which is Region 6, Kansas and Missouri, Region 7. So this is showing the watersheds themselves that we have broken down by, you know, these are large watersheds, and we've broken them into study areas. This shows the tribal reservations along with the 4 Superfund sites, and you can see the Neosho River path is going to be the southwestern boundary of the site, and follows Grand Lake down to Twin Bridges. So there is a map showing everything with the watersheds and the reservations. This just shows the OU5 study area. So OU5 study area it also includes watersheds in Oklahoma and Missouri. And here is a picture of that with showing the sub-watersheds. And to give you a context, it's got OU4 shown inside of OU5. So the OU4 is the chat piles or the mining waste. So that gives you kind of an idea. That's the worst chat piles we call the core area, where a lot of the source material is obviously, over time we've been hauling it, but there's a lot that remains. That's OU4. So there's your context of how OU5 relates to OU4. So the Tri-State Mining District watersheds include, as I stated earlier, there are 4 Superfund sites over 3 states, and that's 2 regions and 9 tribes. It's almost like the Partridge in a Pear Tree song. I feel like waiting to be written. Anyway, so that's the overview of the Tri-State watersheds. Now, focusing our attention on the Oklahoma portion, we have divided those into smaller sub-watersheds. So Elm Creek, Tar Creek, the Neosho, which is several segments shown in brown. And then you have the Lower Spring River, and in the yellow is Lost Creek. So my focus will be on the Oklahoma portions, and Region 7 almost always that I know of comes to this conference. None of the Region 7 RPMs were able to attend. So normally a presentation for the conference would include both regions. However, for the purposes for this, since Region 7 wasn't able to come and wishes they could, I'm just going to be talking about mainly the Oklahoma stuff and then giving you context as necessary. But not going to run into all through the Region 7 stuff. So I think it's a little confusing to some people, and especially when I first started trying to figure out what are the boundaries here, and it's a little bit of trying to figure out where everything lies within. And just in general, 3 main watersheds: the Spring River, which we had to divide into 2 portions, and I'll talk about that later. The Spring River flows north in Missouri and to west and south through Kansas and into Oklahoma. The Neosho River flows southeast into Kansas, from Kansas into Oklahoma, and then the Lost Creek flows southwest from Missouri into Oklahoma. How did we divide up the study area? We divided it into an upper Spring River and a lower Spring River watershed, and to pick a point where it was discernible between those two things based on the fact that we're two different regions of EPA and had to kind of, operate as such. We chose the dams at Empire Lake, and I was obviously not there, but this was chosen because of easy to see, Empire Lake on a map. You can go to the dam. Above the dam is Upper Spring River, which is generally Region 7, and Lower Spring River south of the dam, which would be Region 6, considered the OU5 study area. So here is, I know it's not real clear, but just to give you an idea, if you looked at all of the Region 7 watershed areas and split them into subbasins, and then looked at that as a group with all of the Region 6, these are all the separate watersheds where water is draining into that body of water. So that whole boundary, the water is going to drain within to a body of water within. And the next one over would drain to a different area. So that's why we have divided these up into sub-watersheds, which are useful to study things on a more specific, in a more specific way, because this is such a big area. So in order to really successfully work together, Region 6 and Region 7 have signed a memorandum of understanding back in April of 2019. And this just kind of lays out the way that we work together, and just based on input from the community and stakeholders and other remedial action partners, working together is the best way, and people appreciate kind of having us move hand in hand through the process. It's easier for people to kind of put things together when we kind of show a united front and work together to keep things as similar as possible. So just general timeline, risk assessments, human health and the ecological risk assessment. So in ERA, the ecological risk assessment was completed in 2010. There's a human health risk assessment, 2018, data gaps identified, which were basically holes that we needed to fill to understand things better. That was collected in a shorthand version of human health risk assessment without preliminary remediation goals, was released in 2021. However, based on the watershed-wide holistic approach, we're going to combine those human health risk assessments into one, and that is coming by September of 2024 is estimated. So preliminary remediation goals, that's assigning numbers for cleanups. That's still in discussion with stakeholders. And in April, we're going to the next steps with that. But we're very much in discussion with our partners and stakeholders about how those PRGs will look in the end. As we move through time, we're going to keep finding things that we need to kind of fill those holes, or what they call data gaps. We'll keep doing what we need to fill those. Using the most, up-to-date, research technology, evaluating those as they come up. And we are also, at the end of this month, we're going to be talking with our stakeholders and some tribal members about how to prioritize as we're moving through the watershed cleanup, to, instead of waiting to have a record of decision in hand, to do early actions, interim actions, things that make big differences in the meantime, or a small difference, a big difference, just without waiting. What can we do now? And so we're going to discuss those things with our partners and stakeholders. More to come. Might be a culturally insignificant place. They might be the worst contamination places. They might be more human exposure at those places because they are culturally significant. So we are still working on this, but it's something that we will be working on together as we move through the FS, the feasibility study part of the EPA process. So the general approach is we have some tools in our toolbox. What can we try? And a lot of times you can try, for example, a sediment trap, but you can put a new and unique spin on it. You can, do different designs. So it could be something unique about a sediment trap, or it could be a different location. Other things are constructed wetlands. So this would be what they've referred to as, a passive treatment system. You have flow-through design where it gives the water, residence time, can drop out at suspended load. The little buggies can, the microbes can help, on the dissolved metals as well. I know a lot of you know Oklahoma University has 2 of these, Mare Ranch and the Commerce one. They're relatively small, 3 to 6 acres, one's 3, one's 6. We are looking at partnering with them on something bigger, and we're looking at possibilities at the Douthat area, which is super exciting. Other ideas would be what bodies would we dredge? Could we recover some of the minerals from the waste piles? Bank stabilization, obviously, anything you can stop to avoid erosion of contamination of contaminated areas. And also phytomining technology. Phytomining is when you take a plant and it takes up the metals through the roots from the soil, and then you can take the plant and theoretically extract metals from it. So as we move through the feasibility study, we have changed a little bit on how we're approaching this. And some of these changes were based on comments we got from what we call CSTAG. CSTAG is the Contaminated Sediments Technical Advisory Group. It's a mouthful, that's why we call it CSTAG. And I'm gonna explain what that is in just a second. So we had some comments from CSTAG, and now we are looking at a different approach. Rather than somebody behind a computer modeling, we're going to be going out, getting real world, obviously we've done a lot of sampling and measurements, but we are going to basically do more of an empirical approach where we go out and measure these thicknesses. We use old historic aerials and overlay them and see which parts of the streams are the most dynamic, where is the most erosion taking place, where is the deposition taking place. The best idea I've heard is let the water bring it to you. So go in the worst place where the deposition is stacking up that contaminated material, come in, clean it out, wait for it to bring it back to you, go back, clean it out again, things of this nature. Also, there's a watershed wide characterization report ongoing, which is taking all of the surface water and sediment data that has been collected for years and putting it all into one place. So that is currently underway, as well as within this next year, we'll be putting together a watershed-wide monitoring plan. We are already doing quarterly or monthly sampling and different things, which I'll get into here in a second. So just to explain to you, this slide is about CSTAG and what that means. And sort of like with big, complex, or controversial sites, and they have sediment, you can choose to use this. There's the site optimization route, but if you have a sediment site that's contaminated sediment, you can use CSTAG. So it's kind of like your choice. So before I came around, they chose CSTAG. CSTAG has 4 milestones. We are just at milestone 1, site characterization. And the timeline, I put a quick slide together, not gonna go through all this, but July 2022, we presented to them, gave them information. In October, they came back, gave us some recommendations. We provided a letter back to them in January. after some other communications. And now that is where all of the changes in our approach have kind of come in, and we've gone back and forth. We've got that information from them. We're talking to our partners and stakeholders, and we're still having meetings on that first milestone. So more to come. End of October, we're meeting again to talk about this prioritization scheme, and all of this stuff is kind of coming together. But at the moment, we don't have a milestone 2 meeting yet, which is the PRGs or the RAO development. So many acronyms. The Remedial Action Objective. That one will come next. I would have to just let you know, I'm not exactly sure when that's going to be, because we have kind of changed stuff around a lot. So the ongoing monitoring, so Office of Research and Development is ORD. USGS is when collecting the data. ORD it helps, they receive the data, they do some of the analysis there. So as a team, we're perpetually, it's like I said, every month or whatever, these are the stations. There's 7 in Oklahoma, there's 8 in Kansas, and there's 10 in Missouri. And these are all the USGS stations marked on this map. The red circle is where January of coming up here in 2024, we will be having a new monitoring station there, and that's essentially downstream from all of the Tar Creek, Elm Creek, all of the most contaminated ones is downstream from there, upstream from Grand Lake, and just far enough away from Grand Lake to not have an extreme backwater effect. And it's accessible, which is obviously key. Got to be able to get to it. So this one's starting in January. Just not going to go through this whole slide, but in wondering what we are doing on a regular basis out there is we are looking at the transport of sediments. So we will be measuring. There's obviously we're sampling for metals. They are also taking measurements for discharge and things like that so that they can obtain information about that stream bed sediment. One other thing that we talked about last time we were here was that we had sampled last October a small, about 300 foot, 0.3 mile stretch of Tar Creek by behind the nursing home. That people had observed kids swimming there and signs that people were building little dams across the waterway to kind of trap the water to create more of a swimming area. I got it marked there on the map approximately where it was. Although we had sampled across the watersheds, we did some site-specific sampling there. October's not exactly the time of year where everybody's going to be swimming, but we figured the lower levels would give us a more conservative answer anyway. So those results came back. We put a memorandum together because it's not an official risk assessment. It was never intended to be such. It was just a site-specific targeted write-up. That memo was released to the watershed stakeholder group about 2 months ago. And I should say, it found that you should not swim in the Tar Creek, that it would increase your risk to unacceptable levels, and also the bank along the creek, also unacceptable levels of risk should be avoided. As far as community involvement, we do the stakeholder calls periodically. Every month we do a Region 6/Region 7 watershed-wide or TSMD-wide call, and it gives updates for the RIFS process as well as we walk through it. And we are, I know this has been in the works for a while, but I think it's really, really close this time, this Basin Bulletin. I've been told that, I talked to Elizabeth Kramer, who I believe said like this coming fiscal, or the fiscal year that just started. So at some point this next calendar year, it should be done. And here are, like I said, my Region 7 counterparts were not able to come, but I have put Region 6's personnel contact information here. So I'm Sarah Goyer, OU5. Stephen Cowan, he's in the back, he's on OU4. He's on chat. And then Allie Dunford is new. She's on OU2, which is residential yards and high access areas. Also, Janetta Coates, our community involvement coordinator back there, been for many years. Hey, Janetta. And Jason, Rachel, and Elizabeth, while Elizabeth Hagenmeyer has officially stepped away. She's now a supervisor over in Region 7. So now Jason is kind of stepped in. Rachel helps, but Liz Hagenmeyer is still involved, but just more on a higher level kind of involvement as we're all taking the reins over. Anyways, I would also, if you ever want any information about any of the Superfund sites, you can Google the Superfund site. They all have pages with lots of documents, maps, etc. As far as questions go, does anybody have any questions?
There is a question.
Yeah, I've got a question for you. I'm really excited to see this work getting underway in OU5. And I know it's going to be a really long-term process, but it's so important, and I really appreciate it. I was really excited to hear that you are trying to emphasize the opportunities for early action within OU5. And with regard to that swimming hole, could you go back to the photo that you had, that area? So I took Dan Brabander, who unfortunately had to leave there flying back to Massachusetts, and his students down to this site this morning because I wanted them to see it and to think about whether there are any questions we could ask of that space from a scientific perspective, right? But from that I think that's a sewage pipe going across the creek there. From that pipe down to the railroad bridge, all along that bank on the left-hand side, there are only 7 trees holding that bank in. All the others, until you get to the hillside, have been cut away. And now they are starting to hack off the limbs on the trees on the slope going up to the disc golf course. That bank is going to erode away at some point if we don't do something. So I'd like you to give that some thought, whether it might be a candidate for some sort of early action, especially given that people are using this space, and just give that some thought if we could talk about that later. It's a site of real concern. I think we all as a community need to find a way to make that space safer and to interact with it more appropriately, but I'm concerned about erosion there.
Now that you say that, next time I go down there, I'll have to look at it with fresh eyes. Like Rebecca and I have talked about, you can have visited someplace before, but your perspectives change over time, and so you go back, you see something new. So when I go take a look at it again, I'll keep what you said in mind, and I do have Allie, thank you very much, writing stuff down so I could follow up afterwards. So I'll follow up with you guys for sure.
Fantastic.
Thank you for
Yeah.
bringing that to my attention. Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
So earlier on the map that you showed, it looked like part of the watershed was in Arkansas, but is it not?
Just Missouri, Kansas, and Oklahoma, the tri-state. So 3 states all meet in that corner.
But nothing is getting over into Arkansas through like the aquifer or anything else.
Like I said, I've been around for a year and never heard Arkansas mentioned one time ever.
Okay.
But Missouri is, Kansas is just to the north, but Missouri is to the east from both Kansas and Oklahoma. I don't know the distance to the Oklahoma or the Arkansas state border, but I don't believe the two would be associated.
My other question then is, when we heard the previous speaker talking about how they got phosphorus and things added, is there anything else that can be done in this area as you undertake these studies, as you're trying to assess the watershed? Is there anything that can be done to maybe update? Like, how often are we updating the levels that are allowable by law? Like, are we keeping up to date with that when we're doing these studies, or since the Superfund site has been around for so long?
So clean water quality standards is not my forte. I'm an environmental contamination or remediation background person. And as far as the regulations that are set forth by the state, I mean, I'm aware that there are, they have standards for many different things. I think those are more state questions about nutrients and stuff like that. I wouldn't be able to directly answer questions about what specific nutrients we have a problem with in Tar Creek. I know that I've heard about the chicken litter thing. I know the mushroom place uses chicken litter, because I was like, wait, mushrooms, it's mushroom compost. I'm like, mushrooms don't poop. So, but I'm like, it's the chicken litter that are used on the mushrooms that are the issue. But as far as that goes, I would divert to somebody else, because that's not, EPA does not do regulate water quality standards. It's like, we just do human health protection type of stuff, like metals, not like we have fertilizer issues. So I would have to say I don't know technically the answer to that, and I would divert to state.
Is poultry litter, the confinement poultry litter places in northeast Arkansas that go into the elk that go in.
Oh.
They are selling the chicken litter to Kansas. The phosphorus is very high.
That's right. I remember hearing that.
The pee and sediments are coming down from Kansas. So you think. Okay, the chicken litter, there's a very large chicken industry in northeast Arkansas, northwest Arkansas, excuse me, that drains down the Elk, which drains into the Grand Lake. To remediate and, out of sight, out of mind, the Arkansas poultry industry sells the chicken litter to Kansas, so it's no longer their problem. Well, it's still Oklahoma's problem, because farmers put it on their land and it comes down from Kansas instead of coming down from Arkansas. So, and poultry litter is very high in phosphorus. Then we also have the sediment. So we think about this Tar Creek contamination as being mining, but the contamination hasn't stopped. It's like we may be pretending that we're stopping things because we're dealing with these chat piles, but all this other stuff is still going on in rampant. And so, yeah, it's a big problem.
Yeah, the chicken. I've picked up on that, just with the fact that I've took over the Tar Creek watersheds maybe 11 months ago or so. I've kind of got a lot. I'm drinking from a fire hose, and I do know about the chicken litter, and I've heard a lot of people talk about how that's an issue. I know we've been down to the swimming hole behind there. Was it last April? It was bright green. And I was like, well, nobody's going to be swimming in it now.
That's toxic algal blooms.
Nutrients.
That's nutrients.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And I can't speak to any of that, obviously.
And that's
I can barely be up here speaking for what I'm doing. So, good point. Yes, sir.
You all do regular sampling of your district. Is there a place where a regular civilian could log on and download what that sampling results are?
USGS puts all of their data online. We also are working on a community-facing dashboard for the entire Tri-State District.
Okay.
It is, being worked on by GIS, and we've had legal weigh in, and we think that this fiscal year, so 2024, because we've got the data in a mapper already. So yes, you can go right now and download USGS, and hopefully within a year or so, you'll be able to have it all in one place and be able to look across Oklahoma, Missouri, and Kansas. Look at the sediment data, look at the surface water data. This would be watershed driven, not chat pile driven.
Right.
Watershed driven, so sediments and surface water. But right now, you can go to USGS, look up Tar Creek. They have all they have all of their stations on there. They have the water quality data and they have the metals data. You just Google USGS Tar Creek. If you want to get my contact information, I might be able to hook you up with the proper web ID. I don't have it off the top of my head, but I do know that's how I found it. So,
I got the first part of your email address, and I thought, yeah, I could probably guess that as your last name and your first name.
it's Goyer.Sarah. Yes, GOYER.SARA at EPA. Oh, sorry. Thank you. See, here's Jim Wolford looking out for me. Looking out for the little people. Thanks, Jim. You're just like,
I'm little people.
hang on. Sometimes you have to be like, I stood up the other day to introduce myself, like, who are you and what do you do? And I forgot the part about who I am. And so I was like, oh, your name is, oh, my name, yeah, my name. Thank you, Jim. Anyways, okay. Wait, I had a guy back here who's been raising his hand for quite a while. Oh, the one in front, please.
My question was, not like his, is at the stations where the swimming hole was, had you tested the water? Is there a station there previous to this?
The swimming hole was a sampling event where we sampled all along the bank from behind the nursing home all the way to the railroad bridge, or the other side of the railroad bridge.
And that had not been...
We had collected samples in that body of water and in the watershed, but not in that specific vicinity of that stretch of Tar Creek.
Before that, or any samples previous to that, to the water sampling event?
In that very specific vicinity, that was the first time within that 0.3 mile stretch.
Okay, so what my question was, are the remedial levels higher now than they were before? With all of the remediation that's been done, are they lower now?
I could not directly answer that, but the watershed characterization, the collection of all this data is looking at all those trends right now. So hopefully by this time next year, I'll know exactly how to answer that question. If you can imagine thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of samples collected in all types of mediums. So it's not just sediments, it's sediments sieved, sediments unsieved, surface water, there's so many samples. So looking at a report or several reports doesn't really get all that. We're trying to get all of the data collected by everybody that's been vetted as being qualified data to look at those trends is what we're doing.
I've taken many of those samples, but I've never heard of any results.
Who are you with?
Not anybody now.
Okay. I am just as curious as you are.
It's been years past, but I've did a lot of the samples and never heard any of the results.
I think I have to.
Oh, so I'm getting hooked. But hopefully this time next year we'll be able to talk about that. And I mean, just looking at stuff, it does look like there have been improvements. That's from the preliminary look at the data. Yeah, it does look, and you would think, looking at those maps, one more, and then I've got to.
I'm sorry, I've got.
Oh, we gotta go. Sorry, sir. I'll get with you afterwards. Okay?
Oh, that's wonderful. I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay. I was just trying
I'm
to.
trying to make up time.
Yeah.
Okay.
No problem. I'll just go talk to him
Okay,
right now.
thank you so much. Thanks, Sarah. Thank you very much. We have been concerned about that swimming hole for a number of years. And last week we had a visit from, I would say some higher ups in EPA, and we were able to share a couple of photos with that gentleman of our kids swimming in that water and diving through those culverts. And so we really are concerned on a deep level. So having it assessed so we don't have to imagine it's dangerous, that we really have the proof. I was able to give that information out at the City Council, the Miami City Council meeting 2 weeks ago. So I'm really happy we finally have some answers that we were able to share with the community. I wanted to keep us moving because I got us behind, and I'd like to ask if DEQ would be, are you ready to present? And does Michael know what you need? Are you talking with Michael? Mm-hmm. If you have slides, you're working with Michael. If I cut you off, I don't mean to. If there's additional questions that you want to ask the presenters, they're still in the room, so do find them. If I've not allowed you to take the time to have the deeper discussion. One of the things that we had hoped to do here during these 3 days is to divide up our time so we can know each other better. And each of us have stories to tell, but also concerns and wishes and hopes to find answers to this and that. So I'm kind of glad that there's these hiccups in the time. So I really appreciate the time for us to think together. There are some additional treats in the room, and so we're getting ready. Are we ready? Are you set? Here they come. I would like to introduce Ellen Isbell, who and Kristen Bliss and Miranda Vesey from DEQ. So glad you're here.
I assume that top is yours.
Let's see. I think she. That looks right to me.
Hey,
Okay.
He's cooking the fish, guys.
There's a reminder for you.
What is that?
If they ask questions, repeat it back.
Oh, gotcha. Hi. I'm Ellen Isbell. Still getting used to presenting in front of a crowd. I kind of prefer speaking to people one-on-one. I would encourage you to get our contact information as we go along, because I would be great with you calling me, emailing me anytime with any questions that you have. I am Ellen Isbell. I've been with DEQ for 5 years now. I work on the OU1 program, which is focused on groundwater
We're in the operations and maintenance phase of that program. I also work on Operable Unit 2, which is residential cleanup, so please call me if you need your soil tested. I'll get started here a little bit, if I know how to change it. Okay, Operable Unit 1. Let's see, I'm going to go over a little bit of area history, site background, current activity, and future activity. I know a lot of you are probably very familiar with area history, but for anyone that isn't, I'll just briefly go over that. As early as 1901, lead and zinc ores were discovered in the Pitcher Field, which is 72 square miles approximately. For decades, large-scale pumps were used to keep groundwater out of the mines. And by the early 1970s, all mining operations had ceased, allowing the mines to then fill with water. By 1979, the mine water began to discharge from the mines and had the potential to carry high concentrations of lead, cadmium, and zinc. In 1981, EPA placed the site on the national priorities list, making it what we call a Superfund site. Okay, this is from the USGS, and I think it's a really useful graphic. After the remedial investigation, EPA published their record of decision in '84. The record of decision recommended a 3-point program to include plugging abandoned wells, building a diversion dike to minimize surface water flow into the mines, and develop a groundwater monitoring program with Oklahoma DEQ. To date, over 80 abandoned wells have been plugged. The diversion dike was built at Lytle Creek in the Douthit area, and DEQ continues to do annual well monitoring. This diagram in particular gives you a rough idea of where the mine workings are in relation to the areas of the Boone and Ruby Dew formations, which each contain their own aquifer. In case you're not familiar, the majority of the drinking water in this area does come from the Ruby Dew, which tends to be anywhere from about 1,200 to 1,800 feet deep. It's a very large aquifer covering as much as 4,600 square miles. The primary goal of OU1 has been to limit the spread of mine water from the contaminated Boone aquifer to the Ruby Dew through abandoned wells, mine shafts, or damaged well casings. Oh. How do I go back? I think it skipped. I don't see an arrow. I'm sorry. Oh, there we go.
There it is.
Is that? Let's see. There we go. It skipped ahead quite a bit. Okay, current activity. Our annual monitoring program includes testing well samples for sulfates and iron, which could indicate the presence of mine water even when high levels of zinc and lead are not present. If a well consistently tests high for these indicator parameters, it could mean something like the well casing is damaged, and we would be concerned that water from the Boone might seep in. If we determine repairs to a casing, a damaged casing, if that's what we determine has happened, if the repairs cannot be made, then the well is scheduled to be permanently plugged. We typically have a rotation of about 5 wells, which we sampled this year, and the results will be published in a final report, which should be available soon on our website. I do have the website listed here. Okay, here's just a map of the area which highlights some of the wells that we sample annually. It also indicates location of some of the mine workings and also some wells that we have recently plugged. We have a new well on the horizon, well, an old well it's new on our horizon to recommend for plugging. It's the Quapaw 2 well. It was previously used as a backup source of water for the town of Quapaw. The town has acquired a replacement well now, and so we're going to schedule Quapaw 2 for plugging. All right, these are some of the results. Our most recent results, we compare the results to 3 different limits. First, the background level, which is the average of naturally occurring levels in the area. Second, the tolerance limit, which could indicate a possible mine water impact. And the secondary maximum contaminant levels, or SMCLs, which could indicate a more probable impact from mine water. None of these wells, I'd like to always state, do not show the presence of lead or zinc or cadmium. Some of the wells do show some elevated levels for iron. In this case, I add additional 6-month testing for wells such as that, and most of the wells do get annual. Some of the others get 6-month. So with that, we can keep an eye on any trends that we might see.
Anything stand out to you?
Well, yes, in particular, and you know, you might notice picture 6, and so we're keeping a close eye on the any trends for picture 6. Like I said, we have not seen any lead or anything like that in it at this time, but there's a good possibility that we'll need to plug that one in the future. I'm not sure that any repairs could be made to that one if the well casing is damaged. In fact, we had to close picture 5 a while back, and so I wanted to use these graphs as an example of, you know, and this clearly shows an impact from mine water. Yeah. Again, this well did not show lead. An investigation of this well determined the casing was damaged and it could not be repaired. So therefore, we permanently plugged that one. Also in OU1, we did build a diversion dike at Lytle Creek to minimize mine water volume by controlling the flow of surface water into the mine workings. Our annual inspection includes evaluating erosion, ensuring vegetation does not impede the flow of the creek, and a visual inspection of a mine shaft seal, which is highlighted there as well on the map. And there's an address there if you're interested. Okay, for the future, you know, we're going to continue our annual well sampling and diversion dike inspection, and we will continue to plug wells as needed. I think we're going to save questions for the end after. Yeah, after we kind of give an update on each operable unit. So I do work with Kristen Bliss on OU2 residential soil cleanup, and she's going to give you an update on that program. So appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks, Ellen.
Hi, everybody.
No.
We were going to save them all to the end until we get through OU2 and OU4. Is it okay if we wait? Can you write your question down and we can get to you at the end there? Just give me a few minutes and we'll get through these 2 and then we'll take your question. Oh, sorry. Here is Ellen's contact information if anybody would like it. We'll flash your contact information again after the end of this one too, so more coming soon. Okay, guys. My name is Kristen Bliss. I'm with the Oklahoma Department of Environmental Quality. I'm the project manager, along with Ellen, for the OU2 residential cleanup program. A really quick and brief history about just operable Unit 2. So of course, the Tar Creek Superfund site was listed on the MPL in 1983. We've talked a lot about that. But in 1997, the record of decision for specifically OU2 was finalized. So that did a few things, one of which, of course, it established the purpose of the program, which was to address residential cleanup in high access areas. High access areas would be anything like a daycare, a school, a hospital, a park, anything that people use a lot of time and have a lot of contact with, anything that the public uses freely. We always want to try to address those areas first, obviously, because most people have contact with those. It also did a few other things, which is identified the contaminant of concern as specifically lead, and then it also set the action level at 500 milligrams per kilogram. And that basically is the level that it needs to be reached for us to clean up that contamination. From 1997 to 2015, EPA managed the residential cleanup program for OU2. They did a great job. They cleaned up a lot of houses and took a lot of waste out of contact with the public. I believe the number is about 3,000 homes and business, or not businesses, but high access areas were cleaned up through that program during that time. And then in 2015, they handed it off to Oklahoma DEQ and to us to manage the program through a cooperative agreement that we basically share the cost for that program. The way that it's set up now, Ellen, obviously, who spoke about OU1, handles the RD portion of the program, so the remedial design side, that is the environmental sampling part of it. And then I handle the actual contaminant removal and then the restoration of the property side of it. As I said, again, the action level for that is 500 milligrams per kilogram. That's an important number, so I just wanted to make sure that everyone got that. And then I wanted to kind of give you guys a brief overview of what we've been up to this year. In the remedial design side, Ellen's been pretty busy. DEQ completed environmental sampling on 177 properties in high access areas just within the last 12-month period. Those properties can vary in size from, by the way, multiple acres in this case to tiny residential yards and houses. Kind of the whole gamut is what we've kind of dealt with this year. So out of those, 137 properties were sampled in coordination with various tribal nations so that they could satisfy their HUD funding requirements. And if anyone has any questions about that, we can totally discuss that at the end. As far as the RA side goes, we've remediated 24 properties just in the last 12 months. We've got roughly 15 right now that are on our list to continuously keep plugging away and get those houses to them as quickly as we can. 6 were done in coordination with various tribal housing authorities to try to, again, satisfy that HUD requirement for them. And DEQ, just in the last 12 months alone, has removed about 2,700 tons of contaminated material from residences in high access areas in the Ottawa County area. And I know that we throw around tonnage a lot, like these numbers, and to me at least, like I don't feel like they have the ramification that I feel like they deserve. So I made a different calculation this time to kind of share with you as an aside. And 2,700 tons is actually equivalent to 540 full-sized African elephants. I feel like African elephants is something that everyone's familiar with. So like, that's a lot. That's a lot of contamination, guys. I'm really proud of that number, by the way. I think I'm gonna start just talking in elephant metrics all the time because it is very good. But 2,700 tons equivalent to 540 African elephants. So that's what we've removed from being in contact with people this year. And that is a victory for sure, right? That's something we can all be proud of. All right. I wanted to give everybody a quick overview about how the program kind of works and how to get in contact with us and get your yard sampled if you would like to. We've tried to make it as easy as possible to contact us because I know it's hard sometimes to do these tasks, right? So we have multiple internet options. In fact, if you scan that QR code right now, it will take you to a sign-up sheet where you can literally sign up right now as I'm talking for us to sample your yard if you are a resident of Ottawa County. So right there, I've tested it multiple times. If it doesn't work, I'm so sad, but it worked last time I checked, so hopefully it works. But scan that and you can sign up. We also have a hub page that is literally only dedicated to OU2, so it has our property map search where you can check and see if your property has already been sampled or remediated. You can also sign up for sampling there as well. You can get more information about our program. You can also fill out a community action survey that gives us feedback about your experience with us or any suggestions that you have. We really want to be able to provide as many opportunities to get in touch with us as possible, and so we've tried to do that. If you hate the internet, that's cool too. Call the hotline right there. 1-800-522-0206. It is a 24-hour hotline that you will always be able to at least leave a voicemail on, and someone will get back to you next business day typically. So lots of ways to contact us. After that, we will typically contact you once you sign up for sampling information. You'll speak with Ellen. She will send you an access agreement, which literally just gives DEQ a very limited window of time where we can get access to your property to actually get the soil samples. We do need that to be able to do it because this is a 100% voluntary program. We don't force anyone to do anything. Even if you find out you have contamination, it's totally your call on whether or not you allow us to remediate it and how we do that, right? It's all up to you. So we go through and we sign an access agreement. We find a time that we can come out and sample your house that works for you. We're typically up in the area sampling, once every other month at this point. And it all depends on demand. If we have more people that need to be sampled, we will speed that up and do it more quickly. But that's about kind of how it goes at this point. We typically do about 30-ish properties at a time whenever we do a sampling event. It takes us a few weeks to get through that, but once we do that and we've sampled your property, we can typically get you results back within 3 to 4 weeks. Unfortunately, 2 weeks of that is totally out of our control because that's how long it has to sit in the lab to actually conduct the heavy metals test. But yeah, it takes 10 days to 14 days without a rush, like paying for a rush. Yeah, we typically get them back on average about 14 days after we drop them off, and but we can also pay to get a rush sample if we have a really pressing situation. We have a kiddo with high blood lead, something like that. We absolutely will rush that, but that's the typical time. So yeah, you'll hear from Ellen or I in about 3 to 4 weeks with your samples. And then if you do have contamination, then you'll hear from me and we'll go over a remediation plan that we recommend, and we'll make sure that we restore your property after we remove the contamination. I like to say is better than how we found it, because I really do believe that to get people interested in this program in a real way, we have to make sure that we leave people's properties better, in my opinion. And that's what we try to do. So we take care of your sod for 45 days to make sure it roots properly. We make sure that we put really nice quality limestone and compact it well up to ODOT standards so that you don't get any sinking or pooling anywhere. We really do take a lot of pride in the way that we leave people's properties and take it very seriously. So your property will look beautiful when I leave it, I promise. And so also I'd like to add this service is completely free to all residents of Ottawa County. Anyone can call us to have their yard sampled. Even if you've already had it sampled, if you're concerned that maybe you have a flooding issue, you've removed a building and you suspect chat under it, call us. We're happy to come back out and sample it. We will never turn you down. We always want to make sure you guys are safe. That's our job, right? So I will get to our contact information if anybody wants to write that down. We also have our table over there with business cards and all sorts of pamphlets, information, fact sheets if you guys are interested. All of those things are also available on our website, deq.ok.gov, that you can get to. And then that hub page that I flashed, that also has all that information as well. And then Miranda is up for OU4. And then we will do questions after.
Okay, hi, I'm Miranda. I have our newest employee listed on here as well, Nick Johnson. He's been with us for about a month. I've been with DEQ for about 1.5 years, and together we are managing the OU4 projects. So for OU4, these are taking these big chat piles and removing them and remediating the land underneath. So this is our OU4 current status map. See all these various colors of chat piles. I know it's a little hard to see from this far away because it is such a large map with so many things, but the properties in orange are active sites, properties in yellow are upcoming sites, etc. And I'm happy to share that with you, and I'm sure that this map is available to you in many ways. Okay, so I just wanted to give a quick little synopsis of what we do as part of OU4. And this information is all available on the pamphlets as well, as they said, our handout sheets that explain it. But what we do is we take all the contaminated material and we haul it off. If it is able to be processed by a CHAP processor and put into asphalt or other approved uses by EPA, that is done. If not, it's taken to our repository for permanent disposal. After all of the contamination is removed, we then sample the soil underneath it, our transition zone soils, to see if any of that contamination has leaked into the soil. If the soil is clean, we leave it in place. If it is contaminated, it also gets removed and taken to the repository. And then once that is all done, we get the land regraded to make it graded to drain. We get everything seeded, and as Kristen said, with our residential properties, we try to leave that property better than we found it. So we're going to plant with natural grasses, Bermuda grasses, etc. We try to work with our landowners as best as we can to make sure that they are happy with their land when we leave. And we're not leaving it worse, we're leaving it better than we found it. So and this whole process does take years. We're talking about huge chat piles, as you've all seen driving around. These take many, many years of hauling off and remediation to do so. And the actual work itself is done by the Quapaw Services Authority, our contractors to the state. They do an excellent job. You've seen their trucks on the road. This is also in collaboration with EPA, of course, through cooperative agreements with a state match for funding. Okay, so this is just a little synopsis of kind of past, present, and future large-scale OU4 projects. So the first three are some completed projects that we have completed the whole process for. Then we have our current ongoing projects that we're working on right now, and then some that we are in the late stage planning phases, and we'll be starting up very soon within the next couple of years. Some of them even sooner. Okay, this is just those first two that were already completed. These were both actually completed before my time starting at DEQ. So I have just the major numbers for you, and this picture here is before and after of one of the properties at Distal 6A, and you can see the after with the nice lush green vegetation without contamination. But as you can see, we got those large tonnage numbers again, so over 90,000 tons removed from Distal 6A, Beaver, and another 100,000 tons removed from Beaver Creek. Also, a total of 12 mine shafts were filled with these two projects. Okay, so this is another one. It's in the Elm Creek watershed. This project, we remediated approximately 200 acres. And in that was over 1 million tons of contaminated source material was removed, either to CHAP processors or to the repository. And in that project as well, 19 mine shafts were capped as well. And this, I have this final little thing in there which says completed pending, and I just kind of put that in there to show how we really are trying to work with our landowners on this and leave their property just as good or better than we found it. And so this is just, we're going to complete some upcoming action to address a spillway and a dam that we put on the property with a pond, where the landowner would just like to see a slight improvement to it. We want to make sure we're making that pond the best that it can be and that it holds up for many, many years in the future. So we're just going to reinforce it a little bit to make sure that it stays there for as long as it can.
Was it on the map?
Yeah, so that would be, so the green part of the project there, that's the CP007 site. And at the very, very bottom edge of that green with the red border, right along there between the two properties, there's a pond between a private landowner and a tribal landowner that we put in as part of the remediation process. And we are just going to go back and reinforce the dam and the spillway between the two properties to make sure that that pond holds up. Another site that we completed, this was a small project that we did. This was a situation where in the course of our remediations, it was discovered that some of the contaminated material was being illegally moved from a property and used to reinforce a farm road. And, you know, as DEQ, we're trying to we don't want to spread this contamination. So we decided that we would volunteer, you know, our time and our resources to remove this contamination. So what we did was we went out, we removed the contamination, and then capped the farm road with clean limestone material to not spread it outside, even though where it was taken to was technically just outside of our OU4 little boundary. We didn't want to spread it any further. So that has been completely cleaned up. Okay. We have another ongoing project. So I have two major projects we're working on right now. This is the first one, which is getting near to completion. This is also in the Elm Creek watershed, and it's a large property. And when we're finished, it'll be over 40 acres of land that it will be returned to full use with no contamination. Of that, this was a large chat pile. Over 400,000 tons were deemed marketable, so they were returned to market, encapsulated into asphalt and various other EPA-approved methods. And to date, we have removed another 200,000 tons to the Central Mill Repository. We are sort of in the stage where we're doing the final little bits of removal and sampling and going into full remediation within the next 6 months or so. Okay, and our another major project, this is a sort of a more high visibility area. So you've most likely, if you live in the area, driven by this project from time to time. There in Commerce. And it's a large project. We've removed about 60,000 tons of source material from this 17-acre property. This was one of those situations where we had, it was on pause for quite some time for those that are in the area, because we kept finding unknown issues that we just couldn't see in those initial remediation plans. Sometimes this is one of those projects and sites, as most of Tar Creek is, where you have to expect the unexpected. And we kept finding situations that we did not know were there. Drainage issues. At one point, we found chat that was 15 feet below the surface when we were only expecting to see it at about 4 feet. So we had to do a lot of shuffling and figuring out how we were going to address all these new issues. But I'm happy to say we are up and running again after many, many discussions with professional engineers, EPA, the state, Quapaw, et cetera. We found a new plan for remediation and are back up and running and expect this done within the next probably 6 months as well. So both of these projects are nearing completion.
What is no on-site borrow?
No on-site borrow is it's topsoil material. So when we're done, we don't want to leave a crater, right? So we need to be able to grade the land back down so that everything drains properly. But because we kept finding these deep chat depths, and we can't use chat or contaminated material, we were struggling with how we were going to leave this property where it would properly drain and not just be a giant pond. So we had to do some creative decision making and some long discussions with EPA or how we were going to address that. So we've worked through it, but this is one of those constrictions of a small site. It's not, when it comes down to it, 17 acres is kind of small in the grand scheme of things when you're moving large quantities of dirt around. And quick question, I guess.
That looks to be a site that previously, maybe 2 or 3 decades ago, had a large amount of tires that were stored on it and then were illegally set on fire. Was any of your unknown substances related to that?
I have not heard about a tire fire, but maybe, Brian?
What was the question? Sorry. I was around with
100,000 tires or a large tire site where they were burned. I haven't heard anything about that. I'm not sure if it's the same site.
There was some debris that was pushed up at one point, like about 4 or 5 years ago. debris that was pushed up and was set fire as a training for the fire department. But I don't know if but I don't know.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's before my time as well.
No, man, that entire piece of property was covered in tires, the entire, probably 10 to 15 acres of that. It was in litigation, and it was illegally set on fire and burned off.
Wow.
And it was a huge, huge fire.
I'm definitely going to look into that one. Thank you. You learn something new every day. Yeah, okay. All right, so for our so that's what we're currently working on. And so in the future, these are the upcoming projects. So as soon as we move off of these sites that we're actively hauling and cleaning, we are going to move directly onto these other sites. We already have the funding and the plans and everything in place. So we will be doing this very soon. So we're moving another site in Central Commerce. We're going to be working at something in the Beaver Creek watershed, where we're going to be readdressing some old eco-grids. And we're going to be working at the large Ottawa complex, that is up north near the Kansas border. And then we're going to also be addressing a couple of more sites in the Beaver Creek watershed for full remediation. And this graphic right here is just kind of shows you where all this waste has been going to, a distribution of it. So we've removed, and this is a collaboration. It's not just DEQ, but this is OU4 as a whole. But almost 9 million tons of waste, with a large percentage of that going to the repository, but also 22% of that going to market. And this other 11% for other, this is things like filling mine shafts and large subsidences on properties. So instead of hauling it off to then put it into another place, if we can consolidate that waste on site and use it to safely fill mine shafts, we will do that. So a good 11% of our waste has done that as well. So you can see we've addressed many chat piles, many mine shafts, and a lot of acres of land have been returned to reuse. And then these are contact informations for myself and for Nick as well. Feel free to call or email or stop by to the booth while we're still here. But that is what I have for you. So I think I can bring all three of us come up here if you want to address questions for DEQ as a whole. Yes. We have, okay. Okay. Hi, yes. You've been waiting.
I'm sorry, you're going to have to speak up, but I didn't hear quite
We
hear
have
you.
my colleague for irrigation. Is there any discharge coming out of the mine?
Okay, the question is there currently any discharge coming out of the mines? I don't personally keep track of that. I just, pay attention to the diversion dike at Lytle Creek. I do believe that any mine discharge is being evaluated for additional passive treatment.
Yeah, sir. There is, my name's Brian Casella. I work with Department of Environmental Quality. I'm the program manager for our Tar Creek program. There are discharges. Yes, there is a discharge coming from the mines. It's coming from boreholes in the ground, most notably at the Douthit Bridge area, which has been mentioned a couple times throughout the presentations today. There's at least one major discharge there that's coming out right at Douthit at the confluence of Tar Creek and what was the old Lytle Creek. But there are also several boreholes on both the north side and south side of 40 Road, where whenever the mine pool is elevated, we do see discharges.
I wish it were that easy.
So the mine pool is extremely complex. It's got several holes and boreholes that go down to the mine. What the problem is and what we're dealing with right now is it's like having a straw down to the mine pool. everywhere throughout that area. And so whenever it rains and water goes down that straw into the mine pool, it shoots out at Douthit. Douthit's one of the lowest elevation areas. And so the flow at that discharge changes anywhere. It normally runs for about 800 to 1,000 gallons per minute. When it rains, it can go up to immeasurable amounts of gallons per minute. I think Ed Kahili had a really good picture earlier that showed all the water that had been spread, about a half-mile wide there at Douthit Bridge. And that's because all that water that is coming into the mine pool through all these different boreholes and subsidences and mine shafts is coming out in one location. And that's there at Douthit. And we are working, I think Sarah mentioned it during her presentation, we are working with the University of Oklahoma, the Oklahoma Department of Environmental Quality, and EPA are coming up with a solution to try to capture that mine water, measure it, so that we know how big of a passive treatment system we need to build to be able to capture that mine water and treat it and discharge it back into Tar Creek. We're trying to. We're working at a solution to try to. I do not believe so, because my understanding is most of it is surface. It's rainwater that's pooling and going down into the mine pool. But the University of Oklahoma has been working on looking at that. I know one of their latest PhD students was trying to put tracers in the water to try to track to see if it's mostly surface water that's coming out or if it's like kind of pushing the mine pool water out. His research was inconclusive to my knowledge, but it's something that we're going to have to continue to evaluate with EPA to determine, what are the appropriate levels of, constituents that we need to put into a treatment system to be able to capture those, whatever, is in the mine pool. So once we get a handle on capturing the mine pool, being able to measure how much is coming out of there, then we'll begin to monitor and determine what's the appropriate size of a passive treatment system and what are the appropriate constituents that we need to put into the system in order to bind up the metals that are coming out. Sir, we cannot stop it, and we're trying to figure out how to stop it, but we cannot stop it right now. Okay.
Thank you. And it's just like the mine shafts. How are you putting the material into the mine shafts?
Sir, if you plug that, you're going to push it out somewhere else. That's what's going to happen. If it's coming out at 1,200 gallons per minute, if you put a plug in it, then it's going to start popping out other locations. And then we're going to have to figure out where those are at and have to try, and we'll be just kind of chasing our tail. Right now, we know where it's coming out at. We know, and we have an idea of how to be able to capture it right there at this one location. I mean, I understand the frustration of just plug it, but whenever you plug it, that has ramifications to other areas. And right now, we know what we're dealing with.
I'm beyond your frustration.
I understand.
No, you don't. My question was, because I know EPA didn't want to stop it, that solution's been offered to them, and they're not interested. Just like the chicken litter. They're not interested. Water quality, they're not interested. Now, tell me I'm wrong.
I'm not going to speak to what EPA believes is correct or incorrect.
Well, I will. I happen to own the United States patents that will take care of this. And they don't even want to discuss it.
EPA? Any interest?
EPA don't even want to discuss this.
I actually just finished talking to you and telling you that we would talk afterwards.
That's fine, I've heard that for 15 years.
Okay. Okay, so I understand the frustration, but displaying animosity is not solving anything. So why we're here is to figure out solutions moving forward. And we appreciate what you're saying, and I've told you there's been studies on putting the chat back in the hole, because I know that's one you want to talk about. Water follows the path of least resistance. That's all I'm going to say. So if you plug something, it's going to come out somewhere else. That's true fact, because water follows the path of least resistance. So I am not saying that there is nothing we can do, but there have been tracer studies and other studies done. It's very difficult. Do you guys happen to see the underground mine working map in Pitcher, Oklahoma? Have you seen how many thousands or hundreds of thousands of acres have undermining? Those are mined in different layers. There were different beds, and they went all the way from 30 feet to 300 feet below ground. So different formations in different beds across it that are not high. And also, like Ed said, there are some maps that were made. Those maps were based on input from the miners. The miners had there was no reward for being truthful. In fact, they got taxed on the amount they pulled out. So those mine workings may be a drastic underestimation of the amount of underground mine workings. So for 100 years, through 2 world wars, all of those hectares of mine workings were opened up, and all of that chat was put on the ground. How long do you think 100 years of work is going to take to undo? It's not going to be overnight, and I do understand your frustration. So if you would like, I can contact you later, but we need to get off of this subject and on to the next. So if anybody else has any other questions.
We've got a couple questions over here with your hand up.
I can't say who was talking just now.
That was me.
Wait, I'm so confused.
Hi.
You're still here.
There you go.
So perhaps another way of restating this question is, why hesitate with the boreholes that are uphill and plugging them? Like, why? Yeah.
I think what the overall overarching point is that we don't want to make the problem worse, right? We can't be sure that we're not going to make the problem worse unless we know more about it. And so we're trying to learn more about it so that we can make sure that when we do something, it's not going to make it worse and pop out somewhere else and start flooding an area that's like.
Acidic mine water is going to be, I think, a little more dangerous to deal with than chat.
Well, it's more of like, why let clean storm rainwater in higher up in the
Because we
landscape?
don't know exactly
And
how
that's
it's
what
getting
we've been
in,
trying to
where it's
prevent.
getting in, and
Yeah.
how much it's getting in.
Yeah.
That's what Brian was saying. Like,
We're trying to plug
What
it.
we're trying to do is build essentially a giant catchment pond and put a compound weir within that pond to be able to measure the flow. And then what we can do is then begin to selectively plug these ones where we know that they're coming in and measure the change so we can get to an idea of how much can we size this thing. Because right now, we would do that if we would base it off its maximum flow, it would be hundreds of acres in size. And so we're trying to reduce the flow by plugging the different inflows. We just got to be able to measure that.
I guess I'm not talking about percolation down through the aquifer. I'm talking about wells.
I'm not, right. We're talking about boreholes and mine shafts that are in streams, that are next to streams. When it floods, those are conduits right down into the mine pool. If we start plugging all of those, then that's not, mine water doesn't have anywhere else to go now, right? So it's going to pop out somewhere else.
I mean, it's like, if we've got mines up here or higher in the watershed, then why not plug those?
Because your discharge is lower than that.
Well, right, but then the rainwater will not be going down into the aquifer. You talked about straws going down. I mean, then rainwater will be going around it.
What we want to be able to do is understand the discharge there. Right now, we don't have an ability to measure the discharge at the
I mean,
Dalwood location.
but if you could imagine an ant farm, literally, right? Because that's what it looks like underground if you were to take a side section.
Yeah.
We have no idea what's connected to what and what borehole connects to which chamber. We have no idea. So if we do that, again, I totally understand what you're saying, and it's not a bad idea.
It's like stopping the input.
No. Yeah, we're stopping the input essentially, right? But as we understand the system right now, we're trying to create a situation where all of those things that are feeding into it, it's all coming out in one place that we can measure at this point. So to disrupt the system would be to do something unknown to the inside, and we don't know what that would do to the water volume and how to correct for that and measure it. So as it stands right now, we need it to do exactly what it's doing so that we can build that catchment pond and figure out more information about it. Does that make sense or no?
My understanding, this is not my research, I just happen to work with the guy who did the research, but my understanding is that is the goal, is to plug those higher in the watershed holes. But what Brian and Kristen are trying to say is we want to make sure that we are actually having an impact when we plug those holes. And so the current goal is to design this detention pond where we can measure the flow. So it is, all of these things are in the works, kind of simultaneously. Again, it's not my research, but that is my understanding, is that one of the major goals right now is looking at where those potential holes that water may be coming into the mine workings, finding those and plugging those, and being able to, but also being able to measure how much of a change that affects in the discharge portion. I'm a PhD student. I have no idea.
We're actively trying to find the locations where most of the water is coming in. So we don't know. We don't know, like, if we just go out and start plugging every single hole, we may have just wasted money and time.
Okay, so but there's plenty of money and everything at the top, including the plug.
Okay, but there's only a finite amount of us.
Right. But
And
we also don't know where all the
also
spots.
be doing all this other stuff.
We're working on it.
Right, so the poorly understood nature of the knowledge about the communication between all, you've seen the mine workings map, right?
Right, but if there's plenty of money, that's where I come in as far as like.
Okay, so we have worked on, a lot of scientists have worked on tracer studies and other things. It's very difficult because of the lack of interconnectedness, the unknowns, spaces that exist that we are not on, they're not on a map, and the different levels of all of the mining is poorly understood. So what's the one way that you can find things out that doesn't rely on guessing and models and estimations is you measure them, which is exactly what we want to do with OU. Is measure that amount coming out so that we can figure out exactly how to design a system that can maybe not deal with 40,000 cubic feet per second, but it does get a lot of the metal out before it goes downstream. So that would be the goal.
Hi. I have a little bit of a different question. One of you mentioned there was a farm road being fortified with chat illegally. Yeah. I know that there are cities and counties that sell their chat to make roadways and fill potholes and such. And is that illegal? Can they do that?
The raw chat as it stands on the chat piles is not safe for use on roads. There are processors that have to further work it and encapsulate it safely to do so. So yes, some of the chat does get used for asphalt things, but it goes through a full process to make it safe before doing so.
So
and
it's
this
not
situation
spreading.
was just raw chat.
Okay.
Directly from a chat pile being spread out onto the earth. So unsafe methods.
And so one of the solutions or one of the methods y'all were using to get rid of the chat was filling mines.
So it's more like filling subsidences on properties. So if there's a large subsidence, we can fill it with material and then cap it with
Can you
clean
define
material on
subsidence?
top.
Is that like a
So
hole?
like a hole, like a sinkhole. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's for the large sinkholes where we can fill the bottom part of the sinkhole with chat material, and then we do a clean clay, clean other material on top. And then we do use institutional controls, so notices that mark that location. So for future landowners or whoever takes the property on does know that that does exist, that there was a subsidence there
So
that has been filled.
That chat that you fill it with, you said it's been treated and it's not acting as like a filter as rainwater goes through to the water table?
Because it is capped, water's not getting through the clay cap on top of the material. Right.
Okay. Thank
So
you
it's
very
like a mini repository of the subsidences work as.
Okay.
Because
Like
if
a
you
bowl.
can imagine the amount of material that we're moving around and taking away, we have a real topsoil problem, right? And
Right.
finding clean soil to fill with what we take away. So any sort of material that we can use to fill those enormous sinkholes, we have to take advantage of because there's literally not enough.
Is that an Oklahoma issue or nationwide or just?
It's pretty much like the entirety of the site that we all kind of
Just
have
because we've contaminated and abused?
so much material that's being removed or that has been removed from the earth. It's going to take so much to fill it or to replace what we're taking out. It's becoming an issue.
Okay, thank you very much. Y'all's talk was very informational.
He said this guy's been super patient. Yeah.
Okay, last one.
Hi, I think this question would be answered fairly easy. A couple things. One, I would think it'd be a good thing to have one location where all of that contamination is washing out, because you could study it, analyze it, and then develop methods of remediation in that one spot instead of all over the place. My name is Brad. I teach environmental science here at NEO. So a couple things. Real quick, one, if I teach environmental science here, so if anyone from any department here wants to partner with me, anything students can be involved in, anything I can be involved in, any kind of monitoring, any kind of testing, any kind of collection. I've worked for the U.S. Geological Survey as a hydrologist, so I can sample, I can do a little bit of that, and would love to get students involved in that. So reach out to me. And two, my question is, I'm just curious about what the contaminated soil that you remove, where it ends up. Are there any kind of remediation methods to it afterward? What happens to it when it goes?
Yeah, it goes to the Central Mill Repository, basically.
Yeah, what happens to it there at the repository?
So essentially we're building an enormous stockpile of it that it will eventually be capped in place. So it'll be a literal repository for all of that soil that will be relegated to not being rained on or anything like that. There'll be no runoff, but eventually whenever it's filled, it'll be capped in place.
Is there any methods of removing any of the contamination from the soil?
So that's a complicated and good question. We're trying to figure out what soil remediation methods we could potentially use. PFAS has slowed that down quite a bit. I mean, it's unfortunate that a lot of the biosolids solutions right now don't take into account PFAS. So that's something that is going to probably set us back. But we would hope that eventually we can start incorporating that slowly into some of the stuff that we do. But it's just going to take a little bit more research on how exactly we can best kind of use those methods and when they're going to be appropriate versus other ones that we're using right now. Oh yeah, absolutely. Did that answer your question? Decent.
If you have any other questions, please come find us, or if you need contact information, we can give you that. Next is going to be an update from Quapaw Nation from Summer King. She's an environmental scientist, and she kind of knows how to do almost everything. So there's Summer.
Thank you, Ellen. Good afternoon. Again, my name is Summer King. I am one of the 2 environmental scientists for Quapaw Nation, and I'm going to give a quick update on our OU4 progress. So you guys have seen a lot of this. Luckily, the state covered a lot of the history and kind of some of what we're doing. These are all of our chat files as they look today. We are slowly working on these. Like Miranda said, this is not a fast process. So we are talking OU4. You know, we've had updates on OU1 and OU2, other work at OU4, and then Sarah's great presentation on OU5. But I am going to concentrate on OU4. So the Quapaw Nation just celebrated their 10-year anniversary doing Superfund remediation. It started in 2013 at a property we called the Catholic 40. It's a small property, a small project. It was 15 acres, about 107,000 tons, but it's very historically significant to the Quapaws. It was the old boarding school for the Quapaw children so that they didn't get sent off, you know, even further. They got to stay local with their families and get educated. So it was very extremely important to the tribe. So we began work in 2013, finished a couple of years later. EPA was very impressed with the work the tribe did, so they asked us to continue. At the same time, we partnered with the state of Oklahoma, who was also happy with the work, and now we, through our Quapaw Services Authority, do work for the state of Oklahoma. This is just a couple of photos from Catholic 40. Like I said, 107,000 tons removed, 2 mine shafts, and it turned out to be a success. This is what Catholic 40 looked like before on the left, and during remediation on the right. And this is what it looks like today. Okay, this is what it looked like this spring. It might not look like this today. So just some stats. You know, to date, the nation's removed 6.6 million tons of source material. We've capped 48 mine shafts and 7 subsidences. We've remediated more than 600 acres of land, with about another 400 in progress. And on the left are just some of the projects that we've completed in the last 10 years, and some of them we have ongoing. Luckily for us, the bipartisan infrastructure law gave us a boost in funding, and it allowed us to try a new type of project, which I'll get to here in a minute. Just some before and after photos. This is one of our earlier projects, literally taken at the same location. So there was a 50-foot chat pile, and now it's a beautiful pasture. This is my only project that went into row crops. So this is kind of on the northwest side of Pitcher, and still an agricultural field today. And this is one of my new favorite projects. So we're doing something called an interim measure. So this is Tar Creek. That is Tar Creek on the left that runs right next to that chat pile. You can see it's about 10 feet wide. That chat pile was every bit of 60 or 70 feet tall, went right up to the edge of the creek. So at the bottom corner, that is what Tar Creek looks like when it floods. Went right up to that chat base and started, moving that material downstream just every time Tar Creek flooded. So we talked to EPA, decided this was a priority, and this is what it looks like today. We've removed 500,000 tons off of this pile. We've moved the pile back about 150 feet off of Tar Creek, and we've stopped the bleeding. So when Tar Creek floods, it might take a little bit of material, but it's sure not going to take the whole pile like it was every time it flooded. Now, this is an interim measure, so we're not going to clean. Like, we can't do a full remediation here because there's still material upstream, all the way up into Kansas. So we're gonna put a Band-Aid on it. We're gonna stop the bleeding, and 10 or 15 years later, when everything upstream is clean, we'll come back and do a full remediation on this site. So, but let's see, we did pull 271,000 tons of marketable material. So that is material that went to a chat processor and not to our repository. And we are almost done with this project. We've got about 50,000 tons remaining, so it'll be done in the spring. And part of this project included a constructed wetland. So if you look at that pile, chat piles contain water. They're big sponges, and then it slowly releases that water over time. So we've tried to find a way to deal with the water that comes out of that chat pile. So we designed this little constructed wetland, and it's going to take the water out of the pile, give it some residence time. We planted quite a bit of vegetation on that just last month. So next spring, it'll be nice and lush and give that water some time to slow down, drop out any metals, and then it'll flow into Tar Creek. And this is what it looks like from the air. You can see there's kind of 3 points of entry into this wetland. One is that little channel on the left that is coming from, that goes around the pile. One is kind of on the right. You can see a little bit of orange staining. That is water seeping out of what probably will end up being a small drainage, a small creek drainage when we do full remediation. And in the center between the two, you've got water seeping out of the chat pile itself. So we, like I mentioned, we put 1,300 plants in this wetland with our new environmental scientist, Rainey, and I. We spent 2 days out here in the muck planting boxes and boxes of plants. And just a month later, you can kind of just barely see it, but these willows are already sprouting. So the other type of project I wanted to talk about today is what we're calling this generic removal restricted. So this is how we're using our bill money. This is a project that we call the Blue Goose. It is, 250 acres. And when I ballparked it, it had about 2.5 million tons of source material on this property. There's no way that we can send an engineer out to figure out what is under this material when it's 50 or 60 feet deep. So we're going to use our bill money to go in and just take the chat off of the surface. If we can get a chat base out there that's 5 feet deep, then we can figure out what is underneath that chat and get an idea of a full characterization, so that only then can we do a full cleanup. So these are just a few photos from Blue Goose. We're excited to kick this off, hopefully before the end of the year or early next year. So that is our OU4 update. Our Superfund program manager is Craig Creeman, and his email is up there, and then I'll be happy to answer any questions. Hey, nice. Okay. Well, I've got, okay. You need a Piper? Okay. You sure? I've got the classroom one too. Okay. So today I also wanted to talk about our outdoor classroom project. But before I can talk about the classroom, I have to give a little history on the property. So this is what we call the smelter property, and it was the site of the only smelter at Tar Creek. It's on the east side of the site, and it had been remediated twice before it came to our attention in the about 5 years ago. So long story short, we ended up moving it back up the priority list. It got remediated for a third time. That remediation was finished in 2021. We removed an additional 56,000 tons of material off of this property, and it is clean. It has been, the entire property is clean. And then when we reseeded it, we used a native tallgrass prairie and a tallgrass wildflower mix, trying to just experiment with some of these natives. If you've ever dealt with the native seeds, they are extremely hard to get established. So this is going to be our first attempt at using natives rather than a Bermuda or a fescue. So this is what it looked like before. These are actually the old smelter buildings. There was still chat and clunker waste inside the buildings, and parts of this property had been, the previous owners had refused remediation, so there was quite a bit of material all around this property. So during remediation, we hauled off all the contamination. It did go to our central mill repository. And this is what it looked like afterwards. So you can see it is nice, clean, flat, ready to be planted. this is what it looked like the first fall. So I'm like, okay, it's got a little bit of green on it. Okay, we're doing okay. This is the end of year 1. I'm like, okay, like I'm happy with that. I've got vegetation. Like, seriously. So there's year 2. This was taken just this spring. You can see we've got, the pond has been stocked utilizing Peoria Nation's fish hatchery. We have a solar aerator for our little baby fish, and all of the orange flags are native plugs that we went in and planted this spring. This is kind of a conceptual design for the property. We've divulged a little bit. But then this spring I applied for a U.S. Fish and Wildlife grant for an outdoor classroom. So it involved an outdoor classroom, some native vegetation, and then a second stocking of the pond. So let's see. So the classroom is complete. We've planted the native vegetation. We're now monitoring it. We received some free milkweed through Monarch Watch. They actually sent us about 3 times more than we asked for, nearly 500 milkweed plants. And we are sourcing live tree stakes for within the Superfund site. And on the right is just a list of some of the things that we've planted out there. These are some of our plants, and again, the pond, these are some of the baby plugs that we put in earlier in the spring. They're actually doing really well. And this is our classroom. So it is ADA compliant, and the reason that we put it out there is the goal is to end our Tar Creek tours at the smelter site, at our classroom, and they've gone to picture, they've seen the doom and the gloom and the Orange Creek. Let's take them to the smelter site. They can see what Tar Creek could look like in 40 or 50 or 60 years. You know, this is to give them, to let them leave the site on a positive note. As it says, we've taken more than 770 people through the site just since I started counting in late 2019. Now keep in mind, that's COVID. So I couldn't even begin to guess what that actual number is. So, and you guys got to hear about the Youth Apprenticeship Program earlier. We are working with them to help develop some of the Superfund and remediation curriculum. And also, they're gonna help us plant some plants in the spring. So, real quick, I wanted to talk about a different restoration project that we're working on. We got some funding through the Bureau of Indian Affairs to do some work on a creek on the west side of the site. This is called Elm Creek. And when we get done with the remediation, we're going to revegetate 1.5 miles of Elm Creek. Hopefully that'll start next spring, and next fall maybe we'll have some amazing photos and stories from that. We're gonna start at Bird Dog, which is the northern property, the yellow and the orange boxes, and then probably work our way down to a project we call Distal 10A, which is the red box. So really excited about this, and hopefully, like I said, next year we'll have some great stories. So that is it on our classroom. Any questions?
Use fire remediation anywhere, and obviously one of those negative things is getting into the food chain, but has that been used? Or?
So I did a study with the Oklahoma State University, and with our zinc levels, you could hay a pasture 4 times a year and incinerate the hay, and it would take more than 100 years. So. The only capped places, there are 3 things. So one will be the Central Mill Repository. One would be anywhere we leave like a mine shaft. Okay. So only those areas that we leave contamination are capped. Everything else is taken to clean.
Okay.
Just I think what Kelvin was getting at is, they were saying earlier, you know, the remove contaminated soil, you go down 2 feet and then you put a barrier.
Yeah, we don't do that.
Okay, all right.
They do that for yards.
The difference between the residential cleanup
Yes.
and the full cleanup, so residential, the goal is to go down a couple feet, eliminate the barrier,
Anybody else? Yeah. John. Piper.
All right. Yeah. She can't read my mind. So every year we give away, Martin, come on up. Every year we give away scholarships to area high school graduates. Lots of times the student comes. Last year we didn't have a student, we have moms. And this year we have a mom again. Her daughter, this is Piper, and her daughter is Brooklyn Williams. And Brooklyn is a graduate of Quapaw High School as a salutatorian. And she's not here because she's already in her college class. And so what I want you to know that we've done this year that's different, we had some money donated, and when it came in, the wish was that we would do something with it to honor the Ottawa chief cook. And so this scholarship this year is named for Ethel Cook. And so I want you to tell Brooklyn that we've not done that before. We've never named a scholarship after anyone, but that woman epitomized a change that's coming. And I think your daughter is going to do that for us too. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, and we have a few minutes to break. Lift yourself up out of your chairs. We had some great discussion. We had kind of a little but why can't we do this and why can't we do that? And I nobody in the room is more frustrated than me because I want it all done now. But we did have someone earlier say that we have to remember that what we're doing is planning for the 7 generations to come. And so, no, we can't get it done today, even though I would like it. But we have people coming after us that are going to need it done. So we have a presentation coming next. And is Michael getting ready? Okay. And I'd like to tell you who it is. It's Neil Kirkwood. And Neil very much wanted to be here, but I believe he's in Thailand. And so I couldn't get him to fly back just for us. But he's coming in with us by Zoom. And Neil came here just like Dan Brabander, just like several other people have come before, and just like Aaron Gibson yesterday. He came before and he couldn't keep this place out of his head. And so Neil came 25 years ago, maybe even 27 years ago. And he came with 2 other people from the Harvard School of Public Health. And Neil was with the Harvard School of Design. He told me 2 years ago, he contacted me, he said, all these years I've learned all these skills. I know a lot of things now on how to remediate soil. He wrote the book, Phytoremediation. It's a textbook. And he's done things and designed places all over the world to make our world a better place. But what he wanted to do in the last years of his career is to dedicate time for us. And the first semester he did work here. It was with students during Zoom years, during COVID. So his students never got to come here that semester, but they did projects focusing on the Superfund site. So they learned about the problems. They learned about solutions that might work. They came up with a set of examples of what life could be like, how we change our soil, how we change our land, how we fix our water. And in a set of of designs that he called Tar Creek Remade. Then the following year, he was able to, COVID restrictions were lifted, and he was able to bring students here. They traveled throughout the county. They looked at all of the county. They visited towns, they visited hillsides, they drank out of spring water on the other side of Wyandotte. They went to the stomp grounds, they went to the ceremonial grounds for the Seneca. They went back up to the Quapaws. They saw our site. They visited Buffalo. They met our tribal leaders. And they came back with a set of designs that they called Ottawa County Remade. And so you're going to meet Neil, and Michael is going to let me know when that happens. So in the meantime, get you a drink of water. Well, I don't think we drink enough water. It is all about water, right? And Neil will join us in a minute.
Hello, everybody. I am Naomi Andrews, and I built the new website for Lead Agency. Thank you. So I just wanted to get up here really fast because I have seen all of the hard work that Rebecca and Martin and Kendall and Lucas and everybody else who works at Lead Agency puts into this. And I know you guys know better than other people that this is a lifelong project and that this is something that will continue to take a lot of money, not just from the government, but from the people. And without people like Rebecca, who is holding people accountable, if we don't continue to have that throughout the entire project, then it's not going to be sustainable. And so Rebecca might be a little bit upset with me for asking this because I'm always bringing it back. But if you guys have a moment and if you have a little bit of pocket change to spare, please go to leadagency.org and click on the donate button in the top right corner. This work has to be sustained by resources that we do not always get. And in order to provide things like the conference where we get wonderful updates, it requires money. And in order to bring people out to educate us or to entertain us, any of the number of things that Rebecca has done over these past years takes money to do. And what you may not know is that the grants that organizations like Lead Agency get are oftentimes restricted to very specific projects. Like, you can use this money to buy postcards to email to FERC, but you can't use this money to provide snacks at the conference type of thing. So the money that we get has strings with it unless it comes from people who are willing to donate. So please take a minute if you can. No pressure, but we could really use that to help continue to bring you programming like this. So thank you so much and continue to have a great conference.
Bobby. Is Bobby still here? Don.
Let me tell you, so will you allow me to say, uh-oh, here's Neil? Okay.
Then you want me to stop.
It's all you.
That you? Hey, it is. All right, hello everybody. So we're going to do this a bit unconventionally. I will go ahead and start talking, and then if Neil is able to pop in, we will stop and bring him in, and then I will go ahead and get back to it. So, all right, just reading the instructions up here for myself. So I do want to thank Rebecca and everybody else for having me here today. We're kind of bookending the day's session with Ed, who has years and years of history and experience with this region, with me, who this is the first time I've ever been out here. So I'm actually out here. I'm meeting with the Environment Department and some other people tomorrow at Quapaw, and I wanted the trip to overlap with this to kind of get some background and understand a lot of the history and context of what's been going on out here. So I will talk about some work that we're doing that is, I think, relevant and should be of interest to people here. Uh-oh, uh-oh.
Hey guys, hey, listen up. This is Don Nelson. It's his turn. Come on.
Woo! If I were Don Nelson, the basketball coach, it would be another story, right?
You're our guy.
Yeah. So the work I will talk about is something that we are initiating. It is with a different federal agency, so different authorities. And as you know, all federal agencies work in different areas, and we're actually have different ways of working. And we are thinking at larger scales. We're thinking about water resources planning, because we are working with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And we're doing work around the country, a lot of coastal areas as well as riverine areas. So we're also, actually I'll put this is part of the team. We have a number of people from the Engineering Research and Development Center that are involved with us, the Army Corps. We have people from the Tribal Nations Center, Technical Center for Excellence.
I want to tell you something really cool.
Okay.
Remember EPA, EPN? We have.
Batteries are dead in this one.
So this is another network. Okay, so this is the coolest thing ever. Now, we've had agencies be here before, but we never had this many networks. So we got Climigration, we got AGU, we got Thriving Earth Exchange, we got EPN, and now you. Thank you very much. This is so cool.
Excellent. That's what we want to be, is cool. So this is we have a lot of folks that are involved in this work, and I want to give you a little bit of background and then talk about the work that we are starting to do. But I think the way that we're going about doing it, why we're doing it, I hope would be of interest to this group. So this is part of a larger project called Engineering with Empathy. And a lot of what we're trying to do is to address the kind of inequities, historical inequities that we have seen in water resources planning. And this can be everything from clean water to flood to storm water, flood protection, flood risk, all of these different things that we think about water and the kinds of inequities that we see. And I'll talk to you exactly what I mean about equity, but a lot of times we think about the impacts on communities, right? And the types of communities that are more impacted than others. We've heard about environmental justice today, but I'll talk a little bit more in detail about that. What I really want to talk to you about today is integrating different ways of knowing into the planning process. And we've heard some of these ideas out here today, but I'll talk some more about that. And of course, we're thinking about doing this all within the area of natural infrastructure, or other people talk about these things as nature-based solutions. So this is a project, as I said, we're working in different places in the country and trying to create processes and methods to make this happen. There are things that are happening elsewhere and other people are doing, but it's really hard. And so we're going to talk some more about this. So the first thing I want to do is talk about what is the purpose of infrastructure, right? We're talking about natural infrastructure or infrastructure in general. Oftentimes we think about infrastructure as something providing a specific resource or a specific purpose. So flood control, and we see levees, right? And we'll come back to the idea of levees because that's where we're going to be working here over the next couple of years. But more and more we start to recognize, especially when we start moving into things like natural infrastructure and nature-based solutions, that it's more about enabling human capabilities. We start to see that infrastructure can serve multiple purposes, right? It doesn't have to be singly oriented. That doesn't mean, obviously, we want to have clean water, we want to have flood protection, but there are other things, right, that can come out of this. And when we start to think about infrastructure in a broader sense of promoting human capabilities, promoting the kinds of things that make for healthy communities and healthy people, we start to see how important it is to think about the people and not just the services, and think about how we integrate people into the development, the implementation, the maintenance, all of these kinds of things of infrastructure. And also, right, because up until this point, these very narrow focuses of thinking about infrastructure, bringing on board all of the science, and I'm not denigrating the science here, right? Or if we think about the economics that go into a lot of these decisions, they have failed us in many ways. Right? And the people in this room know that very well. And one of the challenges we see moving forward is that with the changing climate and changing conditions and growing populations, aging infrastructure, this approach that we have taken historically will continue to fail unless we really take a step back and rethink the way that we're doing it. For example, right, benefit-cost ratios that economists use, right, rarely demonstrate benefit in protecting water quality, right? So if we look at these things, the types of investments in protecting water quality from an economic perspective only, it doesn't make sense to do that. But all of us here would say that should be a priority, and when you sit down with communities, obviously protecting water quality is a priority. We have the idea of, oftentimes, this idea of lock-in is the idea that we have done something in a certain way for a really long time, and so we keep doing it that way, right? We spent so much money, so much time doing something this way, we must keep doing it this way, even if it's failing, right? And this is common in bureaucracies. It's common in our own personal lives, right? Sometimes we do have to take a step back and rethink what we're doing. Right, and also this idea, the hubris that sometimes we come at these questions about, and the idea that we can actually control the world around us rather than living with the world around us and learning how to be flexible. And so all of this to say that it's important to think about how different approaches to solving problems can work together. Right? Again, I'm not diminishing the role of environmental sciences in this. This is very important stuff, right? But there are also other ways of knowing and understanding the world that can contribute to enhancing our solutions and our solution space. So what I did say, the title of this talk is Cultivating Equity. And this is a word, the word equity is something we hear a lot. And I just wanted to clarify briefly what it is that I mean when I say the word equity. There are three distinct parts when we think about equity. The first of these, and the roots of the tree from which everything else grows, is recognition. and the ability to recognize everyone that needs to be involved in decisions, everyone who needs to be sitting at the table, right, no matter who they are, how old they are, how young they are, how educated they are, how fill in the blank they are, right? The trunk of the tree then relates to procedures. Not sufficient just to have people at the table. We have to have procedures that can actually enhance, and this is what I'll be talking about more in a little bit, enhance their contributions and their participations. And then oftentimes when we talk about equity, we think about distribution. We can think about it in negative sense. Where is all the flood risk happening? We can also think about it in a positive sense. Where are all the flood mitigation measures going, right? And we can see inequities in the distribution. What I really want to do today is talk about procedures. So in the work that we do, we actually cover all three of these, right? You can't actually, just like a tree, you can't split these apart, right? They are all together. They comprise one. But for the purposes of our minds, sometimes it's easier to think about these in bits and pieces. And so that's what I wanted to do, is really focus on this procedural part and focus on this idea of equity and bringing different knowledges together. So when I talk about procedural equity, we're thinking about different types of spaces of engagement, right? And the ways that decisions are made. So I have worked for a long time in Northeast Brazil, working with engineering colleagues and rural planners, and this is Northeast part of Brazil. Probably not what you imagine when you think about Brazil with lush forests or anything like that. It's actually semi-arid. It looks a lot more like Arizona than it does, a lush rainforest. They have a lot of issues with water and water allocation. And so we have decisions that have to be made every year about bulk water allocation, who is getting how much, when. And in these meetings, community members are invited to participate and help make decisions. The problem is the only information is provided by the engineers from the water department that put up these really complex models and outputs that nobody can understand, right? And the challenge then is, how do you actually engage on an equal footing if the language that's being used is not the language that you use to understand the world around you and to convey your ideas and your values and your beliefs, right? And we have actually trained some of these engineers about how to present to communities in ways that are more accessible. It's really hard. They like to fall back on their training for a variety of reasons we can talk about. But the problem is that in these spaces of engagement, science is the language. And if you don't speak science, then it doesn't mean that you're not listened to, but at some point the decisions are made without considering what you are saying, right? Because there's not space for those languages. And so when we're thinking about these procedures, we're thinking about how we can actually create equality through having different languages have an equal seat at the table. All right, so in the interest of time, I'm not going to ask you to guess where this is. This is actually the Niobrara River up in northern Nebraska. I don't know if anybody has ever floated the Niobrara, all right? Okay, you biked by it. Okay, so I did not take this picture, by the way, because I grew up in Nebraska, but when I left, we still didn't have digital photos. So all of my photos are old printouts. But this is a place that I love, right? This is a landscape and place where I have all kinds of experiences that I love and is really important to who I am as a person. Now, what I wanted to do originally, I'm not sure how well this is going to work because it's like one person is sitting at every table. But what I wanted you to do, and I still will ask you to do, is think about a place that is important to you, right? Think about a place that has a lot of meaning to who you are now or at some other point in time. And what I wanted to do was then to ask you to describe it to the person next to you. So maybe if you are sitting at a table with two people, take 30 seconds just to think about a place that is meaningful to you now or in the past, right? That holds meaning and holds a special place, and then just spend a minute or so describing it to the person next to you. You can move. You are not glued to your chairs. Excellent. Move. You can move. We're good. You're good? Yeah. You're done? No. We're done. I just gave them some homework. Oh, freaking no, you have to let you run over. Okay, I'm going to have to gently cut you off here, maybe. All right, what have I loosed? What have I loosed? So I will tell you one thing, just standing up here and watching people, I saw an awful lot of smiles out there. That was pretty cool. People seem to be enjoying talking about these places, so that's great. So I do have a couple of questions for you. So, and I am actually asking for responses. They're not really rhetorical questions. How did the partner describe this place to you? What were the words they used? Did they talk about feelings, stories? How intimate a knowledge did they actually have of this place? Anybody want to field this question? How did they describe it? Not necessarily what they describe, but kind of how. Yes? Peaceful. Okay, so peaceful. So there are feelings that are involved. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
Gloria demonstrated a powerful connection because it was a garden that she talked about eating the food that they grew there.
Okay.
And swimming in ponds. And so very communal activities. That's my impression of it.
Okay, excellent. Yes. I saw, was somebody drawing a map over here maybe? No? Is there a map drawing going on? I don't know. Okay. What else? How else were people describing these things? Anything else? Yeah. Okay, so bringing in family, bringing in friends and other people. Right. I mean, and that's the way that most of us know the world around us, right? Even scientists have friends and families, right? And we talk about worlds sometimes in different ways depending on where we are and who we're interacting with. But the point is that when we start thinking about infrastructure as being more than just something there on the landscape and something that we're interacting with and something that is part of our landscapes and our waterscapes, we have all kinds of ways to describe this, right? All kinds of knowledges that are fundamentally important for understanding those places. And the challenge then becomes, how do we start taking this kind of information, this kind of knowledge, and putting it on par with the other kinds of knowledges that have done a lot of good, but have also led us down a lot of sort of bad places. So I did want to talk briefly here about levee setbacks, and this is where we're getting into the work that we were just starting. Hopefully in the next couple of months. Federal government budgets are always behind, as many of us know. So, since we're partnering with the TNTCX, there are some complications. But many of you might remember back in 2019, all of the massive floods on the Missouri River. I actually happened to be driving in December, going back to visit my family in Lincoln, and normally we cut across at Nebraska City, across the river to get over to Lincoln. We actually had to drive all the way up to Omaha because the bridge was gone. And I remember everybody being so angry with the Army Corps of Engineers for their ineptitude in being able to manage those waterways. Well, part of the problem is, I'm not even going to comment on the Army Corps' role in this, but a lot of the issues have to do with these very outdated infrastructures. So the levee systems that exist, there's probably more than 25,000 miles of levee systems, at least in the United States. And a lot of them are very outdated. Some of them, they've gone past their sell-by date, and they're old, right? And with some of the changes in rainfall regimes and a lot of the way that water is behaving these days, they are being washed away. They're being excised. We see a lot of overtopping, and we see, of course, a lot of people having their lives and livelihoods destroyed because of the failure of these levees for all of these reasons. So one of the things that is happening around the country, they're looking a lot at the lower Missouri in general, but there are a couple of places where they're beginning to work on levee setbacks. And the idea here is that we move levees from within, however close some of these are, to the actual riverbed itself. We move them back so that there is more room for the rivers to actually overflow their banks, slow down, right? And ideally not overtop the levees and flood all of the people. So the idea is, of course, these were all floodplains historically, right? So the rivers, that's why they're farmed, right? Because of all the silt and sediments that are here. And so giving the river a little bit more of what it used to have. So this involves, well, you can imagine a lot of the complications it involves just in terms of buyouts and everything else. But you also have to sit down and think about what these landscapes and these waterscapes are going to look like, right? What is the future of this going to be? So let's say we get all the buyouts taken care of. So in this area, there are two tribes with historical treaty rights and others with cultural interests. And so working with the TNTCX, the goal is to be able to sit down and work with some of these tribes to help integrate the way that they think about these landscapes and think about the value of these, how we can bring that to bear in on the planning process. So we have people that are doing all kinds of other experimental ways of thinking about economics, non-monetary valuation and these kinds of things. But what we'll be doing really is sitting down and planning some of this. So the idea in this project is really to start cultivating equity throughout the project in order, let me put this slide up. In order to incorporate knowledge, right, on the same level as the scientific findings and all of the hydraulic modeling that goes on, right, to understand what these landscapes will look like in the future. So we think about both tangible sorts of things, right, that might be keystone species or culturally important species. We might think about intangible things such as cultural practices. We think about access. We think about what these things should look like in the future. I was actually, I don't know if Tammy is still here, but when I was thinking about this earlier during her talk, this idea of how we bring together these sort of scientific perspectives with other ways of understanding the world is actually something they're doing, it seems to me, in that apprenticeship program, right? They're bringing together all of the science, they're bringing together all of the other ways of knowing this landscape and understanding yourself within that landscape in a really cool way, right? And so this is a similar idea, that we can bring these languages together in a way that doesn't privilege one over the other, but understands how you can have shared understanding and work together. So, right, again, we want to understand how much lead is in our water. That is absolutely critical to understand. But we also want to understand the ways that people see and know their landscape and bring that into the planning process. So this is, these are initial steps in this, working with the research and development part of the Army Corps of Engineers, right? We know Army Corps of Engineers is a gigantic bureaucracy and very much more top-down than some of the others because of the military focus. So figuring out ways to make this sort of thing work is going to be a challenge. But it is important, and I think that we see opportunities today, particularly in the current administration, with a lot of their guidance on environmental justice and the way that we bring communities to bear and moving on. So these are some of the things that we're working with in terms of equity and moving forward with some of these levee setback plans. And that's what I have for you today. So thank you very much.
Can I dream with you?
Okay.
Okay. I really want Kristen, if she's left the room, when she comes back. Is she coming back? Kristen. Marcel. Okay. I want her and you and Jim to talk. Network people should talk to one another. This is, we could network here. It could be like networks talking to networks. And I want to get that picture.
My understanding is that you are the central node of all of this network here. That is one of your gifts.
And Jessica will be in. She'll be able to record it. Okay, so Kristen, the assignment is, if you're all willing, that the network people will be together and maybe have dinner together or talk together. It's just so incredible to have the possibilities that we didn't dream could happen ever. Army Corps doing a thing like this, it's just probably like,
Take advantage of windows of opportunity.
Right, and same with our, so I want that to happen. Now, there's a couple of other people in the, anybody have a question for John other than I've just given him an assignment? Yes, question, okay.
So you're talking about bringing together these different knowledge production traditions and you're going to need different vehicles for conveying that. And so like what kind of scene plus perspectives, like bringing Army Corps of Engineers and having them read poetry about sites to engage. To think about that embodied knowledge that you opened with thinking about a special place. And so I'm just wondering if your efforts are incorporating any of the arts or creative methods.
They absolutely are. All of this will be defined once we lay out a plan of engagement, right? There is, at the University of Georgia, there is a center, it's called the Arts Collaborative, and it's led by Mark Callahan, who is a professor in fine arts. And this has been something that's been around for 15 years, but he engages arts and theater in interdisciplinary ways with science. In fact, I was not part of this, but they just got an NSF grant to help learn how to develop workshops and things like that. And so we engage with him and with his team to help us think about ways beyond sitting around a table to actually engage people and share knowledges. Because you're right? It's not everybody wants to sit down and read a paper, right? Not everybody probably even wants to look at my slides, right? So there are other ways that we can know and can engage, and that will be a big part of it. So we are open to all kinds of ways. Yeah.
Doug, could you repeat who's at University of Georgia?
It's Mark Callahan.
What's the program?
It's Arts Collaborative.
And then, Don, just one other observation. I think it's really great that you're taking this to Army Corps of Engineers as opposed to taking it to communities and saying you need to incorporate this. The science into what you're doing.
Right.
You're taking the different
Absolutely,
ways
yeah. So we are fortunate that we work with a team that is, in the research and development. So they're not, they don't sit in the district offices, right? So they're a different group, and they are very open to doing this. And the TNTCX and some of these other people have been involved in the River Cane Restoration Alliance. So very involved in, and part of that is actually showing to the scientists that, people that have been using river cane in their culture for thousands of years actually know what they're talking about, right? In terms of how you propagate, how you harvest, all of those kinds of things. So we're fortunate that we have a really open group of people that are interested in doing
I got a great idea. So, did you hear that this is the arts working with science? And do you know that there's a musical now? The Picture Project is a musical, right? And it's playing in New York City right now.
Oh yeah, I did say, I knew that.
Right. So we're doing, and then Grace mentioned Misled, which is another play that was written here. We've had music. We had the head of Superfund in Region 6. He wrote a song called "Made to Last." We could play it on our website. Can you play it? Yeah. And so it is the way that we communicate is through the arts. And so there's Bobby Bigby. Are you here? Okay, yeah. She's another story, but there's 2 or 3 people in the room that I haven't had a chance to nag them in how we get arts in with what we're doing. But if you will hang out with us,
yeah,
I got
that's
an
a big
idea.
part of what we do. So I have students that do theater as parts of ways. So water security and theater, yeah. So all kinds of stuff.
How is going to play?
Are we allowed to share Picture Project? Because I know where to find one of their songs.
Oh, sure, you can play it. Yeah. So we're going to play music.
Okay, awesome.
Great.
What do you want? Do you want the Picture Project one? Because I can find that.
Okay. For Made to Last, in honor of the.
You want to do Make the Last First and then do Picture
Right.
Project as well?
Right. Okay.
I just want to make sure I understand.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We need you. Bill Honker, Region 6.
This old town lies off the highway about 10 miles or so. The people who are passing by, it don't have much to show. Empty streets, empty buildings, empty hopes and dreams. But ask around and this old town will tell you where it's been. This old town was once a city 60 years ago. Tens of thousands called it home in search of what's below. old town is a mining town. It made a living underground, but glory days are in the past, and piles of waste and empty shafts are the only things that were made to last. This old town was sacred ground before the mining came. Fish swam up and down its streams, horses ran its plains, but now the hills are piles of barren rock, and the streams run orange and red. The sons and daughters of the mines are raised on iron and lead. This old town is a mining town. It made a living underground, but glory days are in the past, and piles of waste and empty shafts are the only things that were made to last. Oh, life goes on in a mining town, even after all the digging's done. The mines and the mills lie cold and still like windows on another time. A mining town knows all too well the costs go on and on, and you never really see the bill till the mining company's gone. The things the miners are left behind tell a tale we won't forget. A few may profit from the mines, but many pay the debt. This old town is a mining town. It made a living underground, but glory days are in the past, and piles of waste and empty shafts are the only things that were made to last. They were made to last.
Birthday event at Region 6 in Dallas. And, but we got there before he got on the stage, and when he looked out, the Cherokee volunteers had set up an inflatable swimming pool, and in the swimming pool were a lot of little orange papered fish.
Wait. Sir?
Oh, wait, there we go. Wait, there's steps to go down there. Will you make sure he's okay? Okay, great. There's also a ramp, but anyway, when he looked out, in the audience were 2,000 people wearing orange fishes around their neck that the Cherokees volunteer students had put together. So we're going to... Do you want to do... I like this one or the talk. Either one. Is that this one's really is it town hall? Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Do you want to talk? Okay. Yeah. So so some of you heard about the Bible, but let's wait a minute. We have a thing we need to do. Okay. Just intermission. Okay. Okay. So every year we have a series of Mike Signer Awards that we present And it's our honor to do that this afternoon.
So, Paul, I see you sitting in the back. Yes. Come on up here and join us. It's your turn. Yeah. Yeah. Over here. I'm just gonna go.
Okay. Can you come up?
Hello. So, a number of months ago, Paul showed up at the office, and Rebecca said, we're going to have Paul do a thing with us. We're going to have him help talk to people who have flooded. I know, but this is the story.
My story's better.
That's okay. And what matters, the point of the story that I'm telling is that I have seen since that day Paul come in time and time again after having walked blocks and blocks and blocks and talked to so many people and left cards when people weren't there and follow up and be diligent. And Paul, you displayed so much care. You were not just going and ticking off a checkbox and finding out if somebody's there. Do you want to do the survey? No. Okay, walk on. You tried to talk people into doing it because you knew the value it would have for them and for the community as a whole. And so it is our pleasure to give you a Mike Sinar Award in honor of your service to the community, surveying individuals affected by flooding.
Well, thank you very much.
Just wait, Rebecca's doing nothing.
I think she wants me to wait till the race is up here.
Yep.
At her photo. So the whole board is here.
Get the light a little bit, that'd be good. Oh, it's right here? Yes, let's do it in front of the, there we go.
Shadows back here.
Yep. Right here. There we go. Come on, scoot over. Yep, we're gonna be in the light.
Yeah. What happened? Okay. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. Here. Oh, I don't know about that.
Go ahead.
How about that picture project?
Yeah, it's an ad. There we go. Skip ads. Here we go.
I know it took longer than expected, but we have received funding to go forth with the buyout process. Now, using the appointed trust, they will decide how the money is allocated, divided, and processed. Now, we want this to be a clean and fair process for everyone involved, where everyone gets what they deserve. We have decided to start with children under the age of 6, as children are at the highest risk of lead poisoning. First up, Wilma Stone. You reside with a child under the age of 6 now.
Yes, sir. My granddaughter's 3, and there's another coming.
We got a 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath. We will start the bidding at 35. Do I hear 35?
My name is True.
35.
Being raised
25K. Next, lot 73, Martin Samuels. This lot is located on the far side of town.
Sir, if I could just...
Miss?
Lena Sanders.
Yes, Miss Sanders. Well, you know the rules of the process. If you do not have a child under the age of 6, you will have to wait until the next round
But
of
my
buy-in.
son's health.
Moving out now.
I won't lose you here.
Miss Sanders, there's nothing we can do.
My son has seizures all the time. He can't live on his own. You can stand there and say that this isn't a priority, but this has
Sanders
years.
lot 126.
Thank you.
We got a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, built in 1965. We will start the bidding at 25. Do I hear 25? 25.
We'll finally be breathing for the ones who ain't leaving. Battle's only begun.
35. Do I hear 40?
But what other choice do we have to make when it seems our lives, they are at stake? So I may be leaving, but my memories will fade away.
Really were.
Buy out and be gone. Pack up and move out. Take what you can and get out while you can.
Do I hear 55? 55.
Do you really think that they help you?
Sanders lot for 76,000 sold. Johnson's lot for 150,000 sold. Memphis lot for 70,000.
Excuse me, how is this possible? My house is worth more than 70,000. You're telling me that the Johnson's house is worth 45,000 more than mine. Their house was built before mine, and ours has a whole other bedroom.
Well, technically, you only have 3 bedrooms.
Who's deciding what's a bedroom?
The trust only considers a bedroom if it is appropriately located near a window.
You
That's
can't
a
just
closet
say
and
that a
bathroom.
bedroom isn't a bedroom.
Now, Mr. Miller, the trust is saying
Yeah, the
that-
trust is saying all kinds of
We
things.
deserve a fair system. People are leaving. The trust thinks they've won. The system ain't just. You keep talking about trust, but I don't trust you enough.
And what does the Board of Trustees get for their properties? I bet there's enough money funded for all of you. I bet they're able to move smoothly.
But what other choice do we have to make when all they're gonna do is take? One day we'll be gone, but from our memories we'll never stray.
Now, what happens to land when everyone is gone? Is it just going to sit here? Will it be returned to the Quapaw Nation?
I'm not allowed to disclose future plans for the land of Pitcher.
But shouldn't the Quapaw tribe be getting reparations for our land?
Unfortunately, right now, our time is being spent on buying out the citizens for the health and safety of this town.
But this process isn't fair for anyone. Everyone is getting cheated. No one is getting...
Buy out and be gone. Pack up and move out. Take what you can get and get out while you can.
This system was built to screw. Did you really think that they help you? Only once or twice.
Sold. We have to move on. Next, lot 96.
That is quite enough. You're terribly mistaken if you just called out lot 96. That is my pool hall, and it is not a discussion.
Sir, what is your name?
Robbie Ray.
Right, Poppy. Well, along with your pool hall, your house
And I will
will...
repeat myself over and over. My property is not up for discussion.
Well, Poppy, you don't necessarily have a...
You don't understand. I ain't leaving. You can't make me. If Pitcher's so bad, let it be myself. Lock me up here. I'll stay gladly. I'd rather burn here in your so-called hell. Pictures where I was raised, where I drove my first car, where I had my first kiss and legal beer at a bar, where I bought my first house, and where I got married, where I had my 3 kids, and where my Rita is buried. So I won't pretend Pitcher's been a jail for the last time. My home, it's not for sale. Do we have to make when it seems our lives they are at stake? So we may be leaving.
Yeah. Thanks. You can see that musical for the next 2 weeks in New York City at the Dixon Place. And Grace and I are going to go, aren't we? There's a couple of things going on, and we're going to eat together at 5 o'clock. And we have our auctioneer back here. Joseph is going to be our auctioneer. We have several items that we're going to bring in, and we're going to be able to eat together. If you're local, if you know people that would like to come and eat with us, they are more than welcome, because we are going to feed you well. Any comments? Anything you'd like to share? Jessica, do you want to end up your day? Is there something you'd like to say? We didn't let you speak this morning. Yeah, you want to talk about it? Go ahead.
Hi everyone, my name is Jess. I've met a few of you already. I'm just here to nudge you to take the survey if today's your last day of the conference. There are QR codes on the tables in addition to paper surveys available at the registration table. If you complete the survey, you'll have a chance to win one of 4 $50 cash cards. It only takes 10 minutes to complete. But if you're going to come back tomorrow, you still have time to take the survey then. Okay, cool. Thank you.